Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Iron Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Gacha's System Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Yagi Toshinori had many regrets throughout his life and career as a pro hero. His inability to help his master in her final moments, his habit of keeping those closest to him at arm's length for fear of their safety, his falling out with Mirai, and yet if he had to do it all over again he would. The world needed All Might, its symbol of peace, to stand as a deterrent against villainy everywhere. Perhaps it's for that reason he was so hesitant to choose a successor when he was first injured, as Mirai had begged. He needed to stand, to show All for One that his last efforts were in vain and that the world would still turn without his greatest enemy. Only now, as he watched young Midoriya haul the last of the garbage that had littered the shores of Dagoba Municipal Beach to the dumpster, did he realize how jaded he had become. "I'm sorry, but without a quirk I don't think you could become a hero." The words he had spoken to young Midoriya all those months ago would haunt him for years to come. He was never more happy to be proven wrong that same day when his soon-to-be successor ran towards danger with nothing more than a book bag and his wits in an attempt to save his friend. Although perhaps he should make a note to work on the boy's self-preservation instinct. Regardless, Yagi couldn't help but smile to himself. Young Midoriya hadn't even received his quirk yet and he was already inspiring others, case in point the beach. Yagi had thought it would take the full 10 months to get it all cleaned up and yet Midoriya was finished in only 9. Apparently some environmentalists had seen him cleaning and decided to help out. "Well done, young Midoriya," Toshinori stated as he approached his pupil. "All Might." The boy screamed in surprise. "When did you get here?" "Just a few minutes ago, my boy." Toshinori replied with a smile. "I see you finished, with a month to spare no less." "Why yeah, though I can't take all the credit. Those activists were a big help." Midoriya replied while scratching the back of his head sheepishly. "Nonsense, my boy." Toshinori waved away the boy's denial. "Perhaps some work on his self-esteem too? They may have handled some of the smaller things, but you were the one to remove the large debris." "Aha." Midoriya chuckled, not entirely sure of what to say while being praised by his idol. "So what now?" he asked. Toshinori immediately buffed up and pulled a single strand of hair from his head. "Eat this," he exclaimed, all the while his huge smile on full display. "Ah. In order to inherit my quirk you must ingest my DNA." Toshinori explained, clearly amused at his young protege's reactions. I guess that makes sense," Midoriya replied, though he sounded more as if he was attempting to convince himself. "Heh. My reaction was very similar to your own. Although my master did make me eat her toenail instead of a hair," Toshinori remarked, smiling fondly at what others would consider a disgusting moment. "Okay." Midoriya hesitantly took the hair and brought it to his mouth, gagging as he tried to swallow it quickly. "Okay. Now what?" "We've got about a month until the entrance exam. Truthfully, I wasn't expecting to have so much time, so I'll need to set up a proper training spot. In the meantime, young Midoriya, are you okay?" Toshinori asked as his young pupil suddenly started losing color and swaying on his feet. Midoriya fell to his knees holding his head in pain as tears began pouring from his eyes. "It hurts. Oh God, All Might, it hurts." "Young Midoriya. What's wrong, what's happening?" Toshinori asked worriedly. I don't. Please make it stop," Midoriya begged as he held his head in pain. "I'm sorry, young Midoriya," Toshinori stated somberly before delivering a quick chop to the boy's neck, knocking him out. "Don't worry, Recovery Girl should be able to help." Toshinori consoled the unconscious boy. Izuku wasn't sure what happened. One second he was listening to All Might explain what they would be doing until the entrance exam for UA, and the next it felt as though his head was going to explode. As he opened his eyes he became increasingly aware he wasn't at the beach anymore. For one, he was in what appeared to be, for a lack of a better term, a void. There was no sun, no clouds, nor waves. Instead there was only an endless white expanse. He tried to speak only to find everything below his nose was a shadowy green mist. Well, this is a bit surprising. In the blink of an eye, not that Izuku could really blink right now, a man he had never seen before stood in front of him. The man was around average height, wearing dark green cargo pants and a gray t-shirt that seemed too large for him. His white hair came down to his shoulders with his bangs just barely obscuring his bright green eyes. Hey Ninth, no need to get stressed out. We're inside your head right now. The man stated, obviously able to read Izuku despite his current appearance. I'm first, but you can call me Yoichi. As you've already probably figured out, I'm the first holder of One for All. The first holder. Did that mean All Might's quirk was haunted? No, One for All isn't haunted. Yoichi stated in amusement. And no, I can't read your mind, at least not in here. I've just done this enough that I know what to expect. Anyway, I know 8th has already explained it, but One for All is a stockpile. However, it doesn't just stockpile strength, it also stockpiles the memories, personalities, and quirks of the previous holders. He explained. Izuku's eyes widened in amazement. If that was the case, then it would mean all the previous holders were inside the quirk he had just inherited. Would he inherit their quirks? How much could they influence the current holders? Could they speak mentally while he was awake, or would he need to be asleep? Whatibio? Whoa there, kid, you can't even talk and I can already feel the feedback from that mental mumble storm. A new voice chimed in playfully. Suddenly, beside the man, Yoichi, a woman appeared. She was tall, wearing a black bodysuit with a white cape over her shoulders. Her shoulder-length black hair was rather messy, though it seemed to suit her considering the mischievous smile she was giving him. Name's Nana Shimura, 7th holder. She stated, and if Izuku's eyes could widen any more they would. Yep, I'm Toshi's mentor. Glad to see he's found a good kid to inherit our burden, but we've got a problem, kid. She stated, her smile morphing into a grimace. I was getting to that. Yoichi stated, bemused, as if he was an older brother dealing with an exasperating sibling. One for All is a stockpiler, and when it interacts with a quirk it usually enhances it exponentially depending on the holder. For me, it turned my measly float into actual flight. I could literally shoot off at Mach speeds when I originally couldn't even hover a few feet off the ground. Nana explained. In your case it's reacted extremely to your quirk. Yoichi stated with a grimace. His quirk? Izuku didn't have a quirk, it's been the single greatest point of torment the past decade of his life. If he had a quirk, wouldn't the doctor have found out when he was 4? His imminent panic attack was thankfully halted when he felt a comforting hand placed in his head. Easy there, 9th. Yoichi stated, attempting to calm Izuku down. We know you thought you were quirkless, and truthfully you might as well have been. Your quirk was just a simple luck-based quirk, making you slightly more lucky than most. Unfortunately, as we said, One for All boosts its holder's quirk to the nth degree. In your case, I don't even know what to call it. Nana stated, blinking a second at the realization. We were so busy trying to keep it from overloading your brain that I didn't even try to figure it out. To be fair, it was the equivalent of shoving a supercomputer in his head. Yoichi muttered, Anyway, the best way to describe it is you now have system. He explained. Izuku, despite his lack of a mouth or body, did his best to express just how little he understood of that statement. It must have worked, as Nana started to snicker while Yoichi muttered about the uncultured. Okay, essentially you've got this thing in your head that'll give you random rewards for doing different things. We've already got a glimpse of it thanks to your training with 8th. He explained. Yep, but the downside is that it's locked us out of One for All. Nana stated with a frown. We can still communicate with you and perceive the outside world through you, but we can't give you our quirks like we had originally planned. Unfortunately, that's correct. One for All is still here, but it's no longer accessible, at least for the time being. Yoichi supplied, though his frown made it evident he wasn't happy. Considering he had probably been inside the quirk since the dawn of quirks itself, it's a valid reason to be annoyed or angry. With that said, we should also apologize. Nana stated somberly as she looked at Izuku in a way that reminded him of his mother. You suffered because we attempted hold onto One for All as it melded with your quirk. We're still not sure of the specifics, but we think it's to prevent any cheating. She explained, adding air quotes to the word cheating. Unfortunately, I agree, if this new quirk functions in the manner I believe it does. Then we'll do our best to avoid tampering with it. Yoichi agreed with a grimace. Suddenly Izuku's vision started to blur as he felt the world stir around him. Looks like we're out of time, you're starting to wake up ninth. Yoichi stated. Don't worry, we'll see you again soon, just try not to overdo it figuring out your new quirk. Tell Toshi I said hi. Nana shouted as his vision finally blacked out. Arg, that what hit me? Izuku groaned as his eyes slowly opened. His head still hurt and his vision was bleary, but as it cleared he saw he was laying on a stretcher with a privacy curtain pulled closed. Had All Might taken him to a hospital? Oh good, you're awake, dearie. A kind, elderly voice stated. Looking over to where the privacy curtain was now slightly drawn back, Izuku could see a short, elderly woman in a lab coat using a giant syringe as a cane. His eyes widened as he immediately recognized the woman. Recovery girl. Ah. His sudden exclamation was cut off by his headache flaring up. Suddenly the woman's lips extended to kiss his forehead where a green glow formed. After a few moments the pain subsided and was replaced by a sudden tiredness. Here, eat these, but not all at once. Recovery girl instructed as she gave Izuku a handful of gummies. Whoa, that was your healing kiss. He muttered in amazement, a notebook suddenly appearing in his hands. Is there a limit to what it can heal physically? Do more serious injuries require more energy, or is it a blanket cost? Does it mutter? Recovery girl's sweat dropped as she wondered where the boy had even gotten the notebook in the first place. I'll answer your questions later, dearie. For now I'll go get the blonde oaf and the rat. They've been waiting for you to wake up for a few hours. Hours? Izuku asked in shock as he was broken from his mumbling spree. Wait, where am I? A hospital? He asked. Oh no, you're in the nurse's office at UA, she grumbled. It would have been smarter to take a boy who's suddenly collapsed to a hospital, but no, that blonde oaf has to bring you to me. She ranted angrily as she stormed out of the room, waving her cane in the air. Adjusting. Finding form. Calibrating. Complete. The gacha system is complete. What? Was this what Yoichi had told him about? Was this the system that had resulted from his unknowingly held quirk and one for all melding? That is correct. As a result of your quirk, lucky boy, and the inherited quirk, one for all, melding, you've now gained the Chaos Gacha. Oh wow, his new quirk is semi-sentient. This is equal parts amazing and terrifying. Should this be more shocking than learning one for all is haunted? Probably not, but he's not entirely sure if today would continue to get weirder, so he'll reserve judgment for the time being. Feat achieved. Receive one for all from All Might plus one legendary ability gacha ticket. Feat achieved. Clean up Dagoba Beach plus one bronze random gacha ticket. Tickets? He questioned mentally. So this is like a game of some sort? Considering the system listed the legendary ticket as an ability and the bronze as a random, does that mean there are different types? Would that also mean there are different rarities? Ticket explanation. Tickets allow you to roll the corresponding gacha they align with. The random ticket can give you anything ranging from items, familiars, powers, and skills. Ticket rarity from most common to rarest are bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, legendary, mythical, and divine. This is too much. When All Might had explained about passing on his quirk to him, Izuku expected he would be able to become a hero. He would finally have the power to make his dreams come true, to save people with a smile on his face just like All Might. But this? He wasn't expecting this and seriously had no idea of what to even do. Could he still become a hero? With this system locking one for all away, would he be able to save people? What if he didn't get an ability that could help others? Geez, kid, you really do overthink things, don't you? The voice of Nana stated inside of his head. Nana? He asked, unsure if he was just hearing things. I'm here and so are the others, but they're quiet for now. Don't want to overwhelm you any more than you already are. Whatever your quirk did to one for all seems to have pushed it past singularity. We can speak mentally now. Gotta say though, your life really is crap. Izuku couldn't see her, but somehow he could feel that she was angry. Why would she be angry on his behalf? It's not like he was anyone special. Okay, kid, 1, special or not, everyone should be afforded common human decency. 2, we're gonna have to teach you how to isolate your thoughts. 2nd and 3rd are already angsty enough without teen think. She chuckled. Izuku smiled slightly, appreciating her attempt at cheering him up. Thanks, Nana. What did you say, young Midoriya? The voice of All Might asked in shock as he entered the room. So allow me to see if I have this correct? Toshinori started, hunched over in a chair sitting beside his successor. One for All contains vestiges of the past users, including their memories and personalities? He asked, counting the information he had just learned on his fingers. Yes. Izuku answered with a nod, doing his best to ignore the way Nana snorted at All Might's baffled expression. Apparently you had a quirk all along, however it was so minuscule it had basically no effect. Toshinori stated, holding up a second finger. Also yes. Izuku nodded. I'll have that FNG imbecile's license. Who uses that outdated test anymore anyway? Recovery Girl raged on the other side of the room, causing both mentor and mentee to shiver in fear. Moving on, the 2 quirks have now melded together with yours, becoming some form of system that will allow you to gain random rewards? Toshinori asked, looking as though he was struggling with that particular nuance. Is that right? I don't know what else to call it. Pretty much. Izuku replied, not entirely sure himself. Nana? Yoichi? Some help here, please. Sorry, kid, we're just as lost as you are. Nana replied, and Izuku had the feeling that she was doing the mental equivalent of shrugging. All we know is that you gain rewards in the form of tickets. How you do so is unknown at the moment. Yoichi replied, offering him some condolences. Maybe try asking the system? I can do that, he can do that? Izuku and Nana asked simultaneously. Young Midoriya? Toshinori asked with a raised eyebrow. Oh, sorry, All Might. The first user suggested I should ask the system. Izuku stated. How would you do that? Toshinori asked. And in this form it's either Yagi or Toshinori Kid. He stated. Probably mentally, just like you did a few minutes ago. First stated. Okay. System, how do I earn more tickets? Izuku asked, deciding he didn't have anything to lose. Information. Feats. Gacha tickets are achieved through feats. Feats and achievements are actions that you accomplish. The more difficult and meaningful a feat is accomplished, the better the reward for it. Oh. Izuku stated aloud while blinking owlishly. He turned to the adults and relayed what he had just learned. Meanwhile, the 1st and 7th holders were having a private conversation. How'd you know that would work? Nana asked the first user with a raised eyebrow. These types of things were a popular genre of manga back in my day. Yoichi replied with a slight shrug. You told the kid to do that because you read a manga that said it's how it's supposed to work? Nana asked with incredulity dripping from her tone. It worked. Yoichi replied smugly. How interesting. Suddenly a small white mouse-like creature exclaimed as he miraculously appeared between the student and mentor. This had the fully intended effect of frightening the pair. Ah! The pair screamed, Midoriya falling off the side of the bed while Toshinori suddenly started spewing blood. Am I a mouse, a dog, or a bear? What's important is, I'm the principal. The creature cheered excitedly. Your principal Nizu. Midoriya exclaimed after fully realizing who had appeared. Can I have your autograph? He asked excitedly, producing his notebook. Why, certainly. Nizu happily agreed, taking the notebook. As he signed his name on autopilot, he read the entry that included a hand-drawn picture of himself with growing interest. Excellent, simply excellent. Perhaps I should nurture this talent myself. So, how much of that did you hear, Principal? Toshinori asked with a growing feeling that he should keep his successor as far away from Nizu as possible. Everything, and I must say this is quite the interesting quirk one for all has developed into. The small mammalian principal stated as he climbed up into a chair beside Toshinori. Have you by chance earned any of these tickets yet, young Midoriya? He asked. Yes, sir, a legendary ability ticket from receiving one for all and a bronze random ticket for cleaning the beach. Izuku explained. Legendary? Just for receiving one for all? Toshinori asked with some surprise. Just. Izuku winced at the collective yell of indignation from the vestiges. Considering he had heard more than Nana and Yoichi, he could safely say All Might was not making many friends through the vestiges. It actually makes a good deal of sense. Nizu chided. One for all has been passed down through 8, now 9, different holders since the dawn of quirks. Receiving it from a holder is something that is not only difficult, but can only be accomplished once. He lectured. Now, Mr. Midoriya, the anticipation is quite intense. Would you kindly use your tickets? Seeing no reason not to, Izuku nodded before simply thinking about using the bronze ticket first. Rolling bronze random gacha ticket. An uncommon ability. Feels. Rarity, uncommon class, changer. Allows you to grow scales over your body that are very resistant to damage and can serve as flexible armor over your skin. Its toughness scales with your physical stats. Izuku's eyes were wide even as he relayed everything to the adults in the room. An ability like this was only uncommon. Something like this would make an amazing quirk, especially for someone that plans on focusing on villain apprehension. Feeling excited at what he could possibly accomplish with just one ability, Izuku quickly used the legendary ticket. Any doubts about his ability to become a hero fading by the second as the gacha showcased its potential. Rolling legendary ability gacha ticket. A legendary ability. Fire Dragon Slayer. Rarity. Legendary class. Changer, emitter, recovery, passive. Allows the user to transform into and wield the powers of a fire dragon, allowing them to generate fire from their body that they can control and even devour flames. They also have great control over their flames, being able to alter their properties such as making them blunt or sharp. They are also immune to all fire below their level and can eat flames to recover their vitality and energy. By consuming other sources of magic, they can temporarily incorporate it into their own flames. Izuku say in stunned silence, his eyes widening to an impossible degree, as he read and reread the description of his second ability. This was so much like an amalgamation of his father's fire breath, Endeavor's hellflame, and Ryukyu's dragon transformation. He wasn't the only one who thought so either. Nizu was practically grinning ear to ear. Here he was having started his day with the mundanities of paperwork, and now he was listening to a potential student relay that he now possessed a power equivalent to 2 of the current top 10 heroes combined. Not to mention the fact that this ability was only one of a potential infinite number of possibilities. That fact was quite evident only moments before as young Midoriya described an ability that could already be incredibly useful in the hands of a smart and creative individual, and he had the sneaking suspicion that Midoriya was. Should I stock up on flamethrowers then? Recovery Girl joked. It would be an appropriate response to critical injury based upon the ability's description. Nizu replied cheerily. Provided that whatever has befallen Mr. Midoriya does not deprive him the ability to eat. He added as an afterthought. But how do I use them? I don't feel any different? Izuku asked aloud as he started to think carefully. Unbeknownst to him, Toshinori opens his mouth to give suggestions only for Nizu to hold up a paw, silencing the man. The principal was far from willing to miss an opportunity to observe Midoriya's intellect in action. According to Yoichi, this system is controlled mentally or verbally, but it also resembles a video game of sorts. Izuku muttered. If this is operating by video game logic, then it would only be logical for me to have it. That's it. Status. Midoriya shouted in realization. Status / Name, Izuku Midoriya. Race, human. Current tickets, none. Abilities / active, 01. Storage, feels. Rarity, uncommon class, changer. Allows you to grow scales over your body that are very resistant to damage and can serve as flexible armor over your skin. Its toughness scales with your physical stats. Fire Dragon Slayer. Rarity, legendary class, changer, emitter, recovery, passive. Allows the user to transform into and wield the powers of a fire dragon. allowing them to generate fire from their body that they can control and even devour flames. They also have great control over their flames, being able to alter their properties such as making them blunt or sharp. They are also immune to all fire below their level and can eat flames to recover their vitality and energy. By consuming other sources of magic, they can temporarily incorporate it into their own flames. Skills / None. Traits / Item storage. Smiling widely at his observations paying off, Izuku noted that both abilities were currently in storage. Mentally selecting Fire Dragon Slayer and slotting it into his active slot, the change was practically immediate. It was as if a comfortable warmth spread throughout his body and continued to circulate. Having read a great deal about emitter-type quirks, not difficult considering they were the most common and most varied, Izuku had a basic understanding of their activation. Remembering one of Endeavor's older interviews, he concentrated on where the warm feeling pooled, around his stomach in this case, and pulled gently on. That feeling. As he continued to pull the warmth further out, he concentrated on the palm of his hand where a small flame sprouted. Amazing. Simply amazing. Nizu clapped happily. How did you do that so quickly, Mr. Midoriya? Even children naturally born with their quirks understand them so quickly. He pointed out eagerly. Oh, I just remembered an interview Endeavor gave a few years ago. Izuku replied as he was busy literally playing with fire. It was during that event the HPSC held to raise awareness for quirk control. There Endeavor gave an explanation of his quirk, Hellflame, and how vital it was for him to train so hard, because a single mistake could be disastrous. He stated canceling his flames out, seemingly remembering how dangerous what he was doing was. Quite amazing, young Midoriya. Toshinori praised. However, this does present a problem. I believe I understand your dilemma, Toshinori. Nizu stated, folding his paws over his lap. What problem? Izuku asked nervously, looking between the principal and All Might. Young Midoriya, unfortunately I'm not sure how to properly train someone with your new abilities. I can and will still provide guidance and help in your physical training as your scales ability relies on it. Toshinori explained with a complicated expression. That's fine, isn't it? Midoriya asked in confusion. I mean, you've worked with other heroes who have quirks similar to my abilities. I'm sure you have observations you could share. Right, of course, haha. Toshinori chuckled in embarrassment. Not to worry, Mr. Midoriya. Nizu cheered happily. While Toshinori will remain in charge of your physical training, I will make arrangements with an acquaintance to help with your Fire Dragon Slayer ability. He explained. You Principal Nizu, sir, where would I be training at? Izuku asked nervously. Why, here at UA, of course. Nizu replied. I am taking the entrance exam in a month. Wouldn't this be seen as UA showing favoritism? Izuku asked. I want to earn my spot here, not get in based on my connection with All Might. He explained. Nizu smiled softly at the young man. Truly, Toshinori had managed to find a worthy successor. There's no need to worry, Mr. Midoriya, yet A is simply the best place for you to train. With our advanced and varied facilities, we can accommodate any abilities that you may suddenly develop between now and the exam. As for your worries of favoritism, there's no need to worry. Toshinori will only attend the exam as an observer, not a proctor. Furthermore, Recovery Girl has no input in the exam as she is our school nurse, not a teacher. Nizu explained, putting Izuku's worries to rest. As for myself, do you honestly believe I would allow anyone into my school if I didn't believe they should be here? He asked. No, sir. Izuku replied. Good, now I believe you should be getting home. Toshinori will take you and explain this arrangement to your mother. Please return an hour after school tomorrow. Nizu instructed, to which Izuku nodded happily. After ironing out a few more details such as his visitor's pass and schedule for the rest of the month, Izuku left with Toshinori, who remained in his deflated form. The nurse's office was quiet for a few minutes with the exception of the happy tune the principal was humming to himself. For a moment it seemed as if the silence would remain unbroken until Recovery Girl sighed. Yes, Chio? Nizu asked the nurse as he watched Midoriya and Toshinori leave through a window. Why, pray tell, did you lie to the boy? she asked. Her tone was neither admonishing nor approving, it was simply neutral. Nizu hummed as he continued to stare out the window. Was anything I said a lie, Chio? The rodent questioned back. Besides, I'm sure you have your own reasons as well? Recovery Girl huffed in annoyance as she cracked an eye open towards the mammalian principal. No, not technically, but we both know the moment he inherited one for all you were pushing him into the hero course. She replied. As for my reasons, that a boy that age should not appear as though he's been in constant fights. His demeanor, according to the buffoon, would also indicate prolonged bullying. She explained with a scowl. Indeed, no doubt a result of his previous diagnosis as quirkless. Nizu replied with a frown of his own. In the hours that he was unconscious, my preliminary investigation had cleared his mother and father as suspects. Mrs. Midoriya is an overworked woman who is simply struggling to provide for her son in a cruel and unjust situation. Mr. Midoriya is overseas working in America at a top-secret research facility connected with Island. Nizu explained as he turned to Recovery Girl. By all accounts, online activity, and the background checks I've conducted, they are both clear. Small blessings. Chio sighed. Then the most likely culprits are schoolmates. She stated. Precisely, I will be looking into this while Izuku Midoriya undergoes his training under the guise of Quirk counseling. Nizu replied. I will also have the individual I spoke of earlier keep an eye open. He added after a moment of thought. Chio snorted. If it's who I think it is, then either she'll adopt the boy as her own or fall for him. She stated with a light laugh. Nizu simply smirked, unbeknownst to anyone, but himself, that is, plans already forming for a brighter future. The train station closest to UA was actually a good distance from the campus itself, around a 30-minute walk or so. In the past, this has been called a curse by many students, most of whom were running behind, who nearly missed their departures. Today, however, it was a blessing for Izuku Midoriya. As he stumbled onto the platform, book bag slung over his shoulder and wearing a pair of green shorts and a white shirt with the words, workout clothes written on the front, he quickly found a trash can to hover over. He had noticed the slight queasiness. Yesterday, when All-Me Tashinori-sensei had driven him home, but hadn't paid it any mind over his excitement about having a quirk. Now, however, as he regained his bearings and tried to calm his stomach, he's silently cursing himself. Throughout the years of researching quirks, their strengths, weaknesses, and side effects, he had often read about quirks that either directly or indirectly increased the sensitivity of one of the five senses. Most cases revolved around an organ such as the eyes, where a quirk manifests in the form of an ocular power. However, in each case and across each sense, the user reported symptoms equal to what he himself had just experienced. Loss of equilibrium, nausea, and dizziness from the heightened sensitivity. In short, Fire Dragon Slayer grants him the heightened senses of a dragon, which include heightened vision, smell, and hearing. Thus he unlucky hit the trifecta for a motion sickness jackpot. After about 10 minutes to regain himself, he starts on the path towards what may very well be his future high school. While he walks, he takes out a fresh notebook and opens it to the first few pages. In the pages were an illustration of the messages and responses he had received from the system, as well as what he knew so far. It had taken a while for him to come down from the high of finally having a quirk, then even longer from the emotional state he was in after telling his mother, but he had come to the realization that his quirk was eccentric to say the least. Not only did it grant him abilities that were essentially quirks, but it also granted items or familiars. How did this abstract quirk actually come into existence? It's not like it fit into the standard categories, those being emitter, transformation, and mutant. No, his quirk, the Gacha as he's taken to referring to it, is something far more complex. Perhaps his best piece of evidence is his Fire Dragon Slayer ability, or more specifically the very last line in its description. By consuming other sources of magic, they can temporarily incorporate it into their own flames. He repeated to himself as he continued walking. Does that mean Fire Dragon Slayer is a magical ability? What even is magic? He asked no one in particular. Not sure, kid, sounds like a load of rubbish to me. The gruff voice of Banjo Daigoro, the fifth holder of One for All stated. Nah, the kid's onto something. The wording feels deliberate. Besides, who's to say we haven't stepped into some cross-dimensional territory here? Yoichi replied, and though his tone sounded serious, Izuku could feel him vibrating from sheer excitement. You're just hoping it's like your manga, you otaku. Nana shot back. But, and as much as I hate to say it, we shouldn't rule anything out. So it's a possibility that my quirk isn't creating these powers and giving them to me, but it's copying them cross-dimensionally, like a catalog of prizes to be won? Izuku questioned as he wrote the theory down in his notebook. It's not the most out there theory in the world. People still don't know what happens to things 13 uses her quirk on. After all, according to the law of conservation of matter, matter can change form but it can't be destroyed or created. He stated, "You lost me, kid. If you break something it gets broke." Banjo replied, and Izuku knew he was scratching his chin with the look of a monk who had just spoken something profound. Smith. Izuku winced, as did the other vestiges, at least the 4th, 6th, 1st, and 8th, at the sound of Banjo getting slapped across the back of his head by Nana. He's sure the 2nd and 3rd users would have done so as well if they weren't ignoring him. "I was kidding," Banjo cried out. "Don't care, Izuku will not be all muscle and no brains, and I will not let you rub off on him. Heavens forbid he starts to take after Toshi more than he already does." Nana grumbled in annoyance, causing said user's vestige to shudder in fear of their mentor. As for Izuku, he chuckled nervously while flipping to another page that had a picture of Nana drawn on it and wrote motherly off to the side. He had thought it best to keep notes on the previous holders of One for All, especially if their quirks could be granted at any time through the gacha. It also helped him feel part of something greater. Sure, he was a little freaked out when he found himself inside a void once again when he finally fell asleep. However, he also got to meet the 4th, 5th, and 6th holders, as well as the silent apparition of what will eventually be All Might's vestige. Banjo was nice and energetic, something he was told was a stark contrast to the holders before him. The 4th holder, Hikage Shinomori, was quiet but respectful. He's happy to keep to himself but is willing to help when needed. Finally, the 6th holder, Entayutai, was also quiet and reserved, preferring to watch and listen. "Heads up, kid, gate ahead," Shinomori stated, causing Izuku to look up from his notebook. "Thanks for the compliment, by the way." True enough, Izuku was fast approaching the gate of UA. And waiting for him was none other than Midnight, the R-rated heroine. Putting away his notebook, he took out the security pass he had been given by Nizu the day before. "You must be Midoriya." Midnight greeted him with a sultry smirk. "I've heard so much about you," she purred. "Why yes, mum." Izuku replied, trying to control his blush. It really didn't help that his only real contact with the fairer SEC for the past decade had been his mother. "Follow me then, Nizu told me to take you straight to ground beta," she replied, winking at him before turning around. "Oh wait," Izuku cried, causing the heroine to turn around with a raised eyebrow. "Can I have your autograph?" he asked, holding out a notebook that was a completely different color than the one she had previously seen him put away. "When did he take that out? I didn't even hear his bag open." Nizu was no stranger to cruelty. It had been the purpose of his entire existence as a lab animal to experience cruelty for the betterment of humans. Perhaps it was for that reason he tended to combat cruelty by returning it 1,000-fold on those who inflicted it. Did that make him cruel himself? Perhaps. Yet was this not the definition of justice? Oh, how he struggled to understand some of the humans' concepts of ethics and morality. Regardless, it was cases such as young Midoriya's that kept him up at night, not out of an inability to sleep, mind you. No, his lack of rest was one fueled by a deep-seated desire for information, a need to root out those responsible so that justice could be delivered swiftly and efficiently. It was one of those nights of little rest that led him here. To a quaint apartment complex with Toshinori, in his deflated form, and Detective Tsukachi at either side. Both men harboring rather intense expressions. "Knock, knock, knock." "Coming," the muffled voice of the occupant called. The trio didn't have to wait long as a shorter, plump woman opened the door. "Oh, Mr. Yagi. How nice to see you again." Inko Midoriya greeted happily. "Hello, Mrs. Midoriya." Toshinori greeted, giving the woman a slight smile. Would you mind if we came in? This is a rather concerning discovery regarding Izuku. He stated. Nizu watched as the woman's features shifted immediately from happily surprised to concerned parent in an instant. What happened? Is he okay? She asked. Greetings, Mrs. Midoriya. I am Nizu, the principal of UA, and rest assured Mr. Midoriya is quite well. In fact, he should be starting his counseling session any minute now. Nizu informed, drawing the woman's attention down to himself. However, we would like to come inside, as we have some rather disturbing information to share with you. He informed. Yes, please come in. She ushered the three inside, leading them to the living room. After everyone had taken a seat, she sat across from the three with a concerned expression. Now will you please tell me what this is about? Inko asked. Of course, however, if you wouldn't mind, we do have a few questions first. Mrs. Midoriya, what would you say your son's school life is like? Nizu asked as he laid a briefcase on the coffee table. Inko frowned in confusion. Izuku doesn't really talk about school. I know his grades are very good and I've never been called about any behavioral issues. Izuku's always been a very kind boy. She explained. Tsukachi gave a slight nod towards Nizu, letting the principal know she had spoken nothing but the truth. It didn't surprise Nizu, he had already done a thorough investigation into Inko Midoriya and had no reason to worry about her character. I'm sure you're aware, but Mr. Midoriya applied to our heroics program. Nizu stated, to which Inko nodded with a slightly guilty expression. I wish I could say I've always supported his dream, but I can't. After my baby was falsely diagnosed as quirkless, all I could do was imagine what would happen if he got hurt. She explained somberly. Did you ever outright deny his dream? Toshinori asked with a similar guilty expression. Never. I believe the worst I ever did was apologize after his diagnosis. She stated, with fresh tears starting to form. I meant it as an apology for not being able to give him a quirk, something he had looked forward to since he had seen his first hero. She explained before grabbing a tissue to wipe her eyes. I apologize for bringing up bad memories, Mrs. Midoriya. Toshinori apologized. Back to the subject of school, have you ever seen this before, Mrs. Midoriya? Nizu asked, sliding a packet of papers towards her. Blinking the last of the tears away, Inko picked up the packet and began to read. As the minutes went by, the sounds of papers frantically being flipped back and forth grew rapidly. Finally, after reading the last page, Inko Midoriya was the very definition of apocalyptic rage. What is this? She demanded in cold fury. This isn't my son. She stated with a tone of finality that dared any of them to argue. As the school he has applied to UA has access to his student record. Nizu explained, taking the packet from her. This was what we found when we did so, and as you can see, it paints young Midoriya in a very unflattering light. Thankfully, Mr. Yagi and myself have met young Midoriya personally and know this record to be falsified. Nizu stated. Why would Aldra do this? Inko asked, not at all placated by the knowledge her baby boy's record was practically destroyed. That brings us to our last question. Nizu replied as he folded his paws over his lap. Mrs. Midoriya, what is your son's relationship with a boy by the name of Katsuki Bakugo? Izuku wasn't quite sure who to expect when Principal Nizu had stated he would have someone help him understand and train his abilities. After all, UA has a laundry list of pros that either work as teachers or are directly linked to the school. However, apparently it was no one in that very long list. Trust him, he had it memorized. Why are the Dragoon hero, Ryukyu? He shouted in shock as midnight led him into the heart of what looked like an abandoned city. The woman in question smiled kindly at him even as she chuckled at his combination of nervousness and excitement. And you must be Izuku Midoriya. It's a pleasure to meet you. She greeted. Yes, ma'am, can I have an autograph? He asked timidly while pulling the same notebook he had midnight sign out from his bag. Of course, here, I'll do that before we get started. She replied while taking the offered notebook after Izuku opened it to the desired page. Just before pen met paper, Ryukyu paused as she actually started to read some of what he had written on the pages about her. Her lone visible eyebrow raised as she moved from observations of her fighting style to questions and possible applications of her quirk. Does she have to fully transform, or can she only use parts of her transformation like her wings? Is it possible to transform her skin into its scale-like structure without a full transformation? She recited mentally, asking herself the questions as she read them. I've never tried half of this, mostly because it was a hassle just to get control over my full transformation. Not to mention how long I spent on learning to fly. She thought to herself while positively beaming at the thought of unlocking more possibilities of her quirk. Casting a quick glance towards the young man who the note belonged to, she realized that she had been staring a bit too long as he seemed to get rather uncomfortable. While still smiling outwardly, she frowned mentally. These notes were asking questions analysts had never bothered with, and Midoriya was starting to look like he had insulted her. Hadn't his teachers nurtured this talent to this degree? Surely someone this talented in quirk analysis couldn't have done so on their own? Quickly signing her name in a spot that wouldn't obstruct the writing, she gave it back with great care. Your notes are exquisite, Midoriya. She made sure to affirm his craft positively. I've never had anyone actually suggest transforming only parts of my body before. If you don't make it into UA, I may just hire you as a quirk analyst. She praised. That's a job? Izuku asked in clear shock. There was silence for several moments as both heroines took in the question, neither processing the implications immediately. When both fully understood what his cry of shock fully entailed, Ryukyu was grateful they both had years of experience to help school themselves. She grit her teeth, fighting to urge to let out a deep growl while Midnight turned her head, muttering expletives under her breath. Judging by the way Midoriya was starting to wilt in on himself, it seemed he could still hear them both. This wouldn't do, not at all. Midoriya, she called softly, getting the young man's attention. Neither of us are upset with you for not knowing about the profession. We're upset that someone with a clear gift for analysis wasn't informed about such a career path. She explained, causing him to visibly calm. Shy, possible trust issues with those in seats of authority, teachers. Her mind supplied. Sharing a glance with Midnight, it was obvious the R-rated heroine had caught the same signs. Midoriya, can I ask who taught you about analysis? Midnight asked. No one. Midoriya replied. I've always been fascinated with heroes, so when I was younger I started keeping notebooks of as many as I could find. He added. How young? Ryukyu asked, quite interested in his story. Izuku paused as he started to think back in his earlier iterations of his notebooks. The first tries were in Crayonsu, 3 maybe 4 years old. He supplied. Around the time of his diagnosis. Ryukyu thought bitterly, already having been given a brief rundown of his situation from Nizu. It was probably why the mammalian principal had insisted she be the one to come help Midoriya get a handle on his quirk. There were other, more experienced heroes with transformation-type quirks, but she was one of the very few with a quirk counselor's license, a role that often included a psychological aspect as well, and even fewer with an extra toe joint themselves. How many of these journals have you made? Midnight asked, more than a little impressed with the boy. I think, not including the one about my quirk, about 14. Izuku replied with a smile, causing both heroines' eyes to widen further. 14, dear God. Midnight muttered. I know it's creepy. I'm sorry for bringing it up. Midoriya stammered an apology. No, I meant I'm impressed. Midnight hastily corrected. For her part, Ryukyu gave her fellow hero a flat look that spoke volumes of her internal thoughts. Woman, you're the actual psychologist here. She then turned her attention back to Midoriya. Who called it creepy? I think it's a rather admirable trait for a hero to gather so much information. And my classmates. Sometimes I mumble what I'm thinking out loud and they find it unsettling. The teachers reprimand me for disrupting class, so I thought it was a bad thing. He admitted. Izuku wasn't sure what it was about Ryukyu, but something deep inside told him she was trustworthy, safe. Unbeknownst to him, Ryukyu was having similar thoughts of her own, an unknown feeling deep in her heart that demanded she keep Izuku close. However, sprouting beside that feeling was the desire to see if she could spontaneously burn a school down. Nodding towards midnight, the heroine took out her phone and stepped away. This left her and Izuku standing in the middle of the faux city street by themselves for the moment. "All right, Midoriya, let's get started on your training," she stated, smiling at the young man. "Yes, ma'am." He readily agreed, smiling cheerfully. Ryuko Tatsuma was not a woman easily impressed, nor was she a woman easily angered. In fact, she's been consistently voted one of the calmest and most rational pro-heroines for 5 years running, one of her few victories against longtime friend Mirko. Today, however, has taxed her virtues nearly to their max. The source of her newfound stress? Why, it was none other than one Izuku Midoriya. When she had accepted Nizu's request to help counsel a late bloomer, she hadn't been sure what to expect. On one hand, Nizu terrified her more than most villains, and she wanted nothing more than to keep a respectable distance. On the other hand, however, she loved children, and if the eldritch rat god of UA was asking for her, then it was likely a child that had a powerful transformation quirk like her own. Whoops. Well, that she was partly right. As she hovered above the mock cityscape, she had to suppress a snort as she watched said boy, currently a 3-story tall red-scaled, Western-style dragon, trip backwards into an office building. Crossing her arms, she simply watched, with a smile as fond memories of her own struggles to get her quirk under control. The thought brought her back to the present, where she cast a glance over her shoulder. A pair of white wings flapping behind her, keeping her in the air. They're smaller than her full dragon form, yet still large enough to handle the lift required for her to achieve flight. This was a perfect example of how Midoriya had impressed her. She had spent years learning how to use her full transformation and avoid collateral damage that it had never occurred to her she could use partial transformations. She really didn't deserve her number 9 ranking if she had missed such amazing applications of her quirk. "Miss Ryukyu, how do you balance the weight of your wings?" Midoriya asked, looking up towards her, his draconic voice deep and booming. She smiled as she flew down to eye level. "You need to center yourself. Most people don't have to deal with the added weight of wings or extra appendages, but those that do commonly need to widen their stances and lean forward slightly. Think of it like wearing a heavy backpack," she instructed. Midoriya nodded as he stood on his hind legs once again, this time following her advice. After not immediately falling over, he took a step forward, then another and another. Her smile widened as, over the next 10 minutes, Midoriya gained a normal level of movement. Yet another example as to how Midoriya had impressed her. In the past few hours, he had gained more control over his abilities than some people who had their quirks for years. Granted, Scales was a rather straightforward ability that, aside from granting protection, gave physical attacks an added oomph. Where he had really shined was in the use of his new pyrokinetic abilities from Fire Dragon Slayer. Maybe it was thanks to his years of analyzing heroes and their quirks, but Midoriya had already created multiple different uses for his flames. From the added punching power of Fire Dragon's Iron Fist, to the range and destructive potential of Fire Dragon's Roar. She was especially surprised that he had taken to naming the techniques as he came up with them. Usually heroes only named their super moves. Though perhaps she shouldn't be surprised, especially after his explanation. "I'm naming them to associate each technique with a certain feeling. Fire Dragon's Roar, for example, is like a quick buildup of heat in my chest that I have to release like a scream. By associating each feeling with a name, it's like creating a form of muscle memory." Q. His reasoning was solid, even if the practice itself felt a little chunny-ish, though she found it rather endearing. Then again, she herself was more than a little desensitized to most eccentricities. "Ryukyu, is someone calling me?" she thought to herself, looking around. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a familiar head of blue hair rocketing towards her. "Neiga." She was cut off when the familiar young woman slammed into her with a full-body hug. The pair landed on an adjacent rooftop in a heap. "Ryukyu, oh my gosh, are those your wings? How can you do that? Is it a quirk mutation? Can you do it to other parts of your body?" Of course, this did little to stop her intern and surrogate little sister from shooting off a plethora of questions. She opened her mouth to answer when a shadow fell over the pair. Looking up, she saw Midoriya landing onto their roof, eyes wide and concerned. "Miss Ryukyu, are you okay? What happened?" he asked quickly while eyeing Nijire with caution. As for Izuku, he had finally gotten used to walking in his dragon form and was starting to practice with his wings. Suddenly his hearing had picked up a booming sound and he caught sight of a girl maybe a few years his senior tackle Ryukyu onto a roof. Naturally, he had panicked that his current teacher was under attack and had subconsciously used his wings to reach the roof. There he overheard the girl excitedly asking questions, and then she turned her sights to him. "Oh, it's another dragon person. Is that your quirk? Can you breathe fire? Are you related to Ryukyu?" she asked in rapid succession. Izuku blinked slowly in confusion as he glanced towards Ryukyu, just to see the woman sighing in exasperation. A H.in order, kind of yes and no. "So cool." The girl cheered, her eyes lighting up as if he had just given her the best present ever. "Hawa." Ryukyu sighed as she stood, dusting herself off and transforming back to fully human. "Midoriya, you should probably go ahead and change back for now. As for our guest, she's Nijire Hado, my intern and going into her 3rd year here at UA." Izuku nodded as flames covered his body from sight only to recede a few moments later, revealing his natural look. He was incredibly thankful his transformation didn't destroy his clothes, a common problem for transformation types. Hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya." He introduced himself, stuttering slightly as his brain processed that the, admittedly incredibly attractive, girl was possibly his future senpai. Unfortunately for Izuku, he had just met the enemy of introversion itself. "You're so cute." Nijire cooed as she was suddenly inside his personal space. "Wow, your hair is fluffy. Do you use anything special?" she asked as she started patting his head. "Oh, warm too." Izuku choked on his reply as Nijire continued to pat and slide his head. Why did it strangely feel good? Ryukyu could only sigh in fond exasperation. On one hand, she wanted to stop her intern from embarrassing Midoriya any more than she already had. On the other hand, Midoriya was very obviously unused to interacting with members of the opposite section and others in general. Not that it was necessarily a bad thing, but if she could spare him some embarrassment before high school, then perhaps exposing him to Nijire would be a good start. "So how was that dragon form related to your quirk?" Nijire asked, tilting her head slightly. "Cute." Izuku thought to himself. "Well, my quirk essentially rewards me by overcoming challenges. One of the rewards I got when it awakened was an ability called Fire Dragon Slayer." From there, Izuku started to explain his quirk and how it functioned. What he hadn't realized was that he had seemingly forgotten his nervousness while speaking about his second favorite subject, quirks. Ryukyu, however, did notice and made a note for Midnight. The older heroine had been called away a few hours ago, but had asked her to keep notes on literally everything that seemed to either set off or comfort Midoriya. She swore if Niza didn't burn that school of Midoriya's to the ground she would. "How about a race?" The excited declaration from Nijire brought her attention back to the teens in front of her. "What was that about a race?" she asked. "I was just suggesting to Izu that if his quirk rewards him for achieving feats, then we should race. If he wins, he's sure to get a reward, right?" Nijire explained. "That could work, if Midoriya feels comfortable with it." She agreed. Nijire was one of the fastest out of her class, especially in the air. If they raced and Midoriya managed to win, then he could probably trigger a reward. I think it's worth a shot." Izuku agreed. "Okay then." Ryukyu nodded before taking in their surroundings. "We're about halfway inside the training ground. The first person to reach the large entrance gate over there wins," she instructed, to which the pair nodded. Flames covered Izuku again as he once more shifted into his dragon form. When the flames dispersed, he crouched on all fours and spread his wings out wide. As for Nijire, she hopped slightly in excitement as small spirals started to take form. "Ready, set, go." Given the signal, both teams took to the air instantly. However, the difference in skill was almost immediately apparent as Nijire started to take a lead that grew by the second. Izuku watched the older teen rocket towards the finish line with wide eyes even as he beat his wings as hard as he could. She's so fast how? He questioned. Her quirk, look at her feet and hands. Nana replied in what sounded like approval. Looking where she had pointed out, Izuku's eyes widened as he saw what looked like spiral waves propel Nijire further ahead of him. His keen vision caught how she was using the spirals on her arms to steer and orient herself while those on her feet seemed to grow as she sped up. I wonder. Suddenly he had a thought, a very bad idea that he probably shouldn't attempt without testing. Screw that. Let's win this thing. Banjo cheered excitedly. Agreed. Izuku replied as her tucked his arms close to his sides, hands balled into large-scaled fists. Fire Dragon Blitz. He shouted, willing an explosion of flames from his fists and soles of his feet, propelling him forward. The result was immediate. His body shot forward as he picked up speed at an alarming rate, his flames practically roaring behind him like a rocket thruster. His vision blurred slightly as he developed a form of tunnel vision, yet he could just vaguely make out the form of a wide-eyed Nijire as he passed her. Now this is pod racing. Yoichi cheered. Suddenly, as the large metal door to the training ground came into sight, Izuku became very aware of one singular fact: he didn't know how to stop. Cutting the flow of flames to his feet, he tried to hold his hands out in front, flames blasting as he did so, only for the sudden JRK of movement to throw off his balance. Clang. Ow ow. He groaned in pain as he slammed straight into the door and fell backwards onto the street below. Are you okay? Nijire asked as she landed beside him, frowning in concern. Feat achieved. Defeat Nijire Hado in an aerial race plus 1 silver trait gacha ticket. Izuku allowed flames to cover his body, shrinking to his human form, and though he could feel his body shake from slamming into a solid metal door, he was smiling. You were right, senpai. I got a ticket. He exclaimed, and soon his smile was matched by her own. That's all well and good, but maybe you shouldn't take a crazy risk like that again. Ryukyu stated as she landed beside the pair. Are you hurt? She asked, looking over Izuku in concern. No ma'am, it only stung a bit. I think my dragon form is way more durable than we originally thought. He replied. You don't say. Ryukyu stated while staring at the solid metal door that now sported a very impressive dent. I'm adding lessons on how to fly with your flames. She added, though she herself was smiling slightly. Oh, roll, I want to know what you get. Nijire cheered. Seeing no reason to say no, Izuku looked to Ryukyu, who simply nodded. Rolling silver trait gacha ticket. An uncommon trait. SXL calibration. Rarity, uncommon. All of the minor inconveniences SEC once had are now gone. Forget about STDs, hygiene precautions, or unwanted pregnancies, because you can adjust how all of those interact with you. In addition, you are very talented in the TNTRC arts. Silence. Total silence followed after Izuku had rolled his ticket and subsequently narrated what he was reading. Who whma? Izuku mumbled to himself as his face flushed near nuclear proportions. Why did he get that? Oh God, he read that aloud too. Looking towards Ryukyu and Nijire, he saw that the pro-heroine was blushing heavily as her eyes took on a dazed look. As for his future senpai, she seemed remarkably calm and had her head tilted as if she had just learned something incredibly interesting. Well, that was something. Ryukyu stated as she managed to get her mind back on track. She would absolutely never admit where it had gone after hearing Midoriya's description. It was only a mantra of, he's a decade younger than you, that she managed to get herself under control. This is far outside my area of expertise, so I'll be referring you to Midnight. She added, please kill me now. Izuku begged as he attempted to will the earth to swallow him whole. Unfortunately, he hadn't developed that power quite yet. It's okay, Midoriya. I mean, it's a perfectly natural act in itself, and you're at that age where it's natural to start experimenting with these things. Ryukyu attempted to console the boy. Perhaps it would have sounded better had she not stumbled through her words and been blushing like a schoolgirl. She wasn't kidding when she said she didn't have much experience in this particular area. But I thought you were still a complete version, first kiss and all, Ryukyu? Nijire chimed in. said Pro's eyes widened drastically as she stared in horror while her intern outed her. Yeah, you said something like, I never had time to worry about such things, I'm far too committed to becoming the best hero I can be. Nijire cheered as she recalled how Ryukyu had comforted her after the younger girl had been stood up on a date. Duh. Please kill me now. Ryukyu groaned in pure mortification. Inko Midoriya took the silence that engulfed the room gratefully. It had been several hours since the principal of UA, Mr. Yagi, and Detective Tsukachi had come to her home and explained in great detail the horrible experiences of her son's life. Everything had been laid bare. From his false records that would have assured he was never accepted into any high school, hero or mundane, to the borderline attempted manslaughter, how else should causing explosions on an individual be seen? She was quite lucky the detective reminded her ripping Katsuki apart piece by tiny piece would still be considered murder, even if it was justified. How could she have not seen this sooner? Looking back now many things made sense, how Izuku stopped going out to play after his diagnosis, how he never even mentioned friends from school, how every loud noise seemed to make him jump, how he had stopped talking about Katsuki almost entirely. That was probably her greatest shame. She hadn't known at the time, but over the years she had taken Izuku to more than a couple of dinners at the Bakugo's residence. Each and every time she was unknowingly forcing her son to sit in a room with a boy that had the same day used his quirk in him, to show him his place. Mitsuki would kill her son when she found out. The pair of women had been friends since childhood and had more than a few idiots try to bully them because of their lackluster quirks. Mitsuki had never put up with it. She hated bullies and always made it clear that, despite her quirk being non-combat oriented, her hands certainly were. Mrs. Midoriya. Nizu called, bringing her attention back to the moment at hand. I'm sorry I spaced out for a moment. Would you show me again? She asked as she picked up the folder the mammalian principal pushed across the table. This is the current list of punishments that will be doled out to your son's transgressors. Nizu stated while motioning for her to read the file. Alright, they were discussing what she wanted to do regarding legal consequences for Katsuki, Aldra, and the other students who physically harmed Izuku. She had a great deal of options thanks to Nizu and his investigation. Apparently Aldra made it a habit of trying to erase Ming camera footage. Speaking of the school, not that she would ever refer to it with the respect a professional educational institution would be due, she wanted it to burn. The entire staff, from the principal to the FING janitors, would never work within a 1,000-meter radius of another educational institution again. The ones who actively encouraged the more physical students would face jail time. The students were a mixed bag. The ones that harmed and tormented her son would receive black marks and, unfortunately due to their age, be tried as juvenile. Odds are they could be facing time in juvenile detention depending on the severity of their actions. Unfortunately, the student population's guilt wasn't entire black and white. There were more than a handful of students who it seemed avoided Izuku to avoid the wrath of those that tormented him. These students wouldn't receive any punishment, as they shouldn't. If anything, there would be an outreach to make sure none of the students in this category hadn't faced similar treatment. Then there were the smallest category of students, those that had tried to get help. There was footage of perhaps 3 or 4 brave souls that attempted to point out the horrendous treatment of her son, only to have their teachers and adults they had been told to trust their entire lives brush off their concerns and told it was simply natural. Those students, even if it was just the one time they tried, would be getting handwritten notes from her to at least thank them for trying. She could still see the look on one girl's face, short brown hair and honey brown eyes. She was in Izuku's class and had stayed after to alert the teacher of how some students had been using their quirks on her son. When the teacher had simply shrugged their shoulders with a smug smirk and replied, "It's just boys being boys," the poor girl looked like she wanted to cry. Finally there was Katsuki, the boy who she had once seen as her nephew and her son's greatest tormentor. The boy was easily going to have the book thrown at him. Despite Inko's friendship with Mitsuki and Masaru, she would ensure their son faced harsh punishment. For starters, Katsuki is still legally a child, so he'll be facing charges as a juvenile. However, given the sheer number of instances of illegal quirk use and quirked assault, he's practically guaranteed a villain ranking. In a normal situation, Katsuki would spend a few years in juvenile detention before being sent to serve out an 8 to 10-year sentence in an adult correctional facility. Unfortunately, this wasn't a normal situation. As pointed out by Nizu, her son, bless his kind-hearted soul, would object to Katsuki's imprisonment. He would see it as his fault that someone's dream was being ripped away from them, even if that same someone had told him to kill himself. It was undoubtedly be a result of his years as a victim and being conditioned to think as such, but his voice would still have an impact if it went to trial. Thankfully, Nizu had a plan, the UA Juvenile Rehabilitation Program. A relatively new program that had been implemented in the last 2 years where UA took juvenile offenders in to allow them a chance at a normal life. It was basically a parole program where if the offender acted out, they would be sent back to juvenile detention to serve out their sentence in full with no possibility of early release. If she agreed, the 3 men would go to the Bakugos tomorrow and inform them of their choices. 1. Katsuki is arrested and faces a full trial where he will more than likely end up in prison. 2. If Katsuki passes the UA entrance exam, he'll be placed into their rehabilitation program and be forced to abide by a set of conditions. If at any point Katsuki violates those conditions, he'll be hauled off. It was far more lenient than he deserved, but it would likely be the only way Izuku would agree. At least this way her son would know that if Katsuki went to prison, it wasn't his fault. This looks good on paper. She agreed with a slow nod. But how is UA going to deal with Katsuki if he and Izuku do attend school together? She asked, looking directly at the principal. That was a matter I intended to bring to the attention of my staff should Bakugo pass the entrance exam. Normally we have the 2 teachers responsible for the first-year Hero Corps students hand-pick their classes based on what they believe they can aid with. However, in this case I unfortunately have to recommend that both Mr. Midoriya and Bakugo be placed in the same class. He stated with a slight frown. Why is that? Inko asked incredulously. The teacher of 1A is uniquely qualified to deal with both of their situations. His quirk allows him to temporarily erase the quirk of any individual in his line of sight. This would allow him to keep a tight leash on Bakugo as well as handle the, frankly, infinite number of abilities your son may develop. He explained. Inko nodded, his reasoning was sound, and if this teacher could stop any fights before they began, then he was preferable for the job. However, the way the Nizu spoke caused her to realize something. You're talking as if Izuku is already guaranteed a spot in your school. She stated matter-of-factly. The grin that stretched across the small albino principal was practically predatory. Yes, that brings this discussion to a close and opens up another. Nizu started. Ring, ring, ring. Only for a phone to start loudly ringing. Tsukachi raised a hand in apology before seeing who it was that had called. Upon seeing the caller ID was that of his boss, his eyes widened. Yes, sir. He answered. Tsukachi, are you still at the Midoriya home? The tired voice of his boss asked. Yes, sir, I'm still here with Nizu. We're discussing our course of action with Mrs. Midoriya. He affirmed. Good, I need you to get to the train station nearby. We've gotten a report of an attempted MLSTR turned ranting racist on the incoming train. I wouldn't have bothered you, but our nearest uniforms are 20 minutes away dealing with a domestic and others can't get there for half an hour. He explained. Hearing the situation, the detective was already on his feet and heading for the door. I'll be there by the time the train arrives. Do we know anything else? The intended victim is a foreigner, animal mutation of some kind. Caller said she was stumbling over her Japanese to tell the suspect to leave her alone. A bystander, male in young teens, intervened and is separating the suspect from their intended victim. Secondary caller reports the suspect is threatening the pair with his quirk. Damn it, this might come to blows. I'll be there as fast as possible. How long for backup? He asked with a frown. Tamagawa will be there with a unit 20 minutes after you. Understood, I'm on my way. Tsukachi stated as he left the apartment in a hurry. Tashinori stood to follow after the detective but was stopped by a paw held out in front of him. Receiving a questioning stare, Nizu simply smiled as he motioned towards the laptop he had set up after overhearing the detective's call. I believe this is the perfect opportunity to inform Mrs. Midoriya of our other news. Nizu informed, and judging by his tone it wasn't a suggestion. Rest assured we can keep an eye on the things from here as well. He added while showing that the laptop was streaming CCTV footage of the train station in question. Some time earlier, Izuku found a seat on the train as soon as the doors opened and promptly sat down. With a tired sigh, he quickly swapped his abilities to avoid another incident like this morning. Abilities / Active, 1-1. Legendary, Fire Dragon Slayer, Uncommon, Scales. He was exhausted, his training with Ryukyu had gone amazingly, but he was finally beginning to understand why people complained about quirk overuse. It was exhausting, like using a muscle that you hadn't even known was there. Fire Dragon Slayer was considerably more taxing than Scales as well. As Yoichi pointed out, it was like he had a secondary energy within his body that fueled his flames. His transformation, on the other hand, was physically draining to both use and hold. He was thankful that All Might's training had given him a huge amount of endurance, especially when the most taxing thing today had been the numerous challenges that Hado had thrown his way. He understood she was trying to get his quirk to reward him, but she had far more energy than even himself. Apparently it was a side effect of her quirk that she was hyperactive. Though that wasn't to say he didn't enjoy her company, she was just as fun as she was excitable and could even keep up with his. Muttering, "Stop." The sound of a slightly panicked voice brought Midoriya crashing back into reality. Looking around the sparsely populated train car, it was already after most people had gotten off work. He found a blonde girl about his age, with an obvious horse-like mutation and horns, swatting a man's hand away from her. The man scowled at her as he tried to grab for her rear. "Shut up and be happy, a human would even pay you attention, you animal freak." The man sneered. Izuku scowled at the man. He had read plenty about mutant discrimination online, but to see someone so blatantly spouting the rhetoric and while attempting to paw at a girl, it made his blood boil. As he stood up and started towards the pair, he caught sight of another passenger scowling as they dialed for the police. He could also overhear the man starting to spout more rubbish. "Leave alone," the girl stated in broken Japanese. "Stupid foreign beach. They should just keep animals like you in a separate car. That way we normal people don't have to deal with your kind." He growled as he finally grabbed her arm. It was at that moment that Izuku gripped the man's arm tightly, causing him to SCK in a hissing breath. Izuku's blood was boiling, the man's rhetoric far too much like the discriminatory comments that had been thrown at himself. However, he attempted to stay calm as he gave the man a smile that didn't fully reach his eyes. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation," he started as he freed the girl's arm and placed himself between the two. "You know, I actually agree with you," he said, drawing equally disgusted looks from the onlookers as the man. Finally, someone who sees sense. The man cheered only for it to die at Izuku's next sentence. "So, aren't you going to find your own car?" he asked. The question saying several eyes widen and multiple others to snicker. "What was that?" The man growled as a hard bone-like substance covered his fingertips, converting them into claws. Izuku, however, was not impressed nor intimidated. He had seen worse from kids a quarter of this man's age. "I said, shouldn't you go find that car for your kind? You know, pathetic old racists who think it's okay to attempt to force themselves on younger girls," he reiterated, dark forest green scales growing over his arms. Izuku backed up slowly, keeping himself between the girl and the man. Idly he noticed the train was coming to a stop. For his part, the man seemed to stew in his rage as the bone claws growing as he grit his teeth. "You little sheet. I'll do nothing." Another voice interrupted. Izuku looked over his shoulder to see who had spoken, and his eyes widened. Standing in the doorway was Kamui Woods and a man in a tan trench coat holding a police badge. "Police, no one move, and you two disabled your quirks immediately." The man ordered, his eyes homing in on Izuku and the man. Izuku complied immediately. He might not have grown up with a quirk, but he certainly knew about the quirk use laws. The man, however, was far less agreeable. "Oh, I guess one freak protects another." He spat, looking between Kamui Woods, Izuku, and the girl. "Well, why dash?" He was cut off as a branch wrapped around his body, trapping his arms against his sides. Another branch grew from the first and acted as a GG to keep him from spouting off more obscenities. Apologies, detective, but I didn't wish for an incident to occur. Woods stated towards the officer. It's fine, I'd much rather have this under control. The man replied. I'm Detective Tsukachi, can someone explain what happened please? He addressed the passengers. Not long after the train left the last station, that man began harassing this girl. Izuku offered, gesturing towards the girl in question. Name and how did you become involved? The detective asked while taking out a notepad from his coat pocket. Izuku Midoriya, I stepped in when I overheard him start to throw insults about her mutation. Izuku replied. Kid did more than that. A woman added as she held up her phone. I recorded everything after it started. She stated, handing her phone to the detective. The detective and hero watched the video for several minutes before nodding to each other. It was a rather clear-cut decision that the man would be going to jail tonight. However, they still needed to hear how it began from the victim. Miss, can you explain what started all this? Tsukachi asked the blonde. Can I also get your name? I Pony Tsunkai e art Tsunatori Pony. Man tried to grab but. She explained in broken Japanese. Miss Tsunatori, would it be easier to explain in English and I'll translate for the detective? Izuku offered in English, realizing that she might be struggling to find the right words. You speak English? She asked in relief. Yes, please, she replied with a small smile. Izuku nodded and in the next few minutes relayed what had happened to Tsukachi. Apparently the man had followed Pony onto the train and started lightly prodding her sides before attempting to fully grab her rear. She, not appreciating the unsolicited advances, swatted his hands away. Unfortunately, he had kept at it, and that was what led to her verbal declaration to stop. As they were straightening out what had happened, 3 more officers arrived. At Tsukachi's direction, Kamui Woods freed the man before the officers placed him in cuffs. After about 30 minutes of collecting statements and the video evidence, the passengers were released. Midoriya. Pony called after the green-haired boy. Thanks for the help, I'm not sure what I would have done. Japan's self-defense laws are a lot stricter than home's. She explained. Izuku smiled at her, it was a sight that caused her to blush slightly. Don't mention it, Tsunatori, I couldn't stand to see someone act like that, he replied honestly. Still, thanks a lot. Oh, I know, can I get your number? I don't really have a lot of friends in Japan? She asked. Sure. Izuku agreed, little flustered that he was trading numbers with a girl, a cute girl too. If you don't mind my asking, why did you come to Japan? He asked curiously. I'm applying for UA. She replied cheerfully. Though I honestly thought my Japanese was better than it is, she added in slight embarrassment. I can help teach you. Izuku offered sheepishly. I'm applying for UA as well, think of it as helping a future classmate, he explained. Somehow that caused the girl's smile to light up even further as she hugged Izuku, causing him to blush heavily. Thank you. I'd love to have some help. She cheered in excitement. Does tomorrow afternoon work? There's a cafe near my apartment. Izuku nodded and the pair traded contact information before they were interrupted by Detective Tsukachi clearing his throat. Miss Tsunatori, Officer Tamagawa here will escort you home, so that okay? He asked. He could speak English fluently, but before he could say anything earlier, Midoriya had already established a rapport with the girl. Thank you, Detective. Bye, Izuku, see you tomorrow, she stated before following after the officer with a cat head. Izuku blushed at being referred to by his first name, but chalked it up to a cultural difference. Tsukachi simply laughed lightly as he pat the boy on his back. So far I have to say, Yagi's chosen well, he whispered to the boy. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized the meaning of what the detective had said. Did this mean he knew about One for All? His questions would have to wait as he was soon fleeted by the familiar notification of the gacha. Feat achieved. Save Pony Tsunatori plus 1 silver familiar gacha ticket. Oh boy, he wasn't expecting that. Izuku trudged up the path to lost in thought, his mind occupied with the events of last night. When Detective Tsukachi had taken him home, he was greeted not by his mother as he had expected, but All Might and Nizu as well. What followed was a lot of tears from himself and his mother. She knew everything. They knew everything. In hindsight, he should have seen it coming. Nizu was notoriously curious after all. There was no way he wouldn't look into whoever All Might had chosen to be his successor. He wasn't exactly sure how to feel about it. On one hand, Aldra, both teachers and students alike, would be facing severe consequences. What they had done to him wasn't just morally wrong, it was incredibly illegal. He knew most of what had happened beforehand wasn't right, but apparently his own understanding of the law wasn't so concrete. What his teachers had told him was roughhousing was actually considered quirked assault and battery. He wouldn't lose any sleep over their punishment, and that was what worried Izuku. A vast majority of his classmates were slated to receive black marks, practically a death sentence for any future career. His teachers would be blacklisted and face jail time for contributing to physical and emotional abuse of a minor. Yet, Izuku couldn't bring himself to care. Was it wrong that a part of him felt happy at their punishment? He had spent almost his entire life being bullied and tormented by these people. Should he feel bad? No way in hell, kid. Banjo stated, his tone telling he wasn't in a joking mood. Those rat BS artists treated you like less than dirt and you're wondering if you should feel guilty they're finally getting their just desserts? That already makes you better than them. It's just isn't it wrong to not feel guilty about it? Izuku asked in confusion. Kid, that's a lifetime of victim-blaming talking right there. You've been conditioned to believe it was your fault. How would you feel if they had done this to someone else? What if it had been another quirkless kid that this happened to? Banjo asked carefully. A surge of disgust welled up at the mere thought of seeing someone put through what he had endured. It was a familiar feeling. He had the same reaction to how that man last night had harassed Tsunotori. You see, kid, that's the normal reaction. You start questioning how you should feel. I want you to frame it as an outsider looking in. Imagine it's someone else and how you would feel seeing them in that situation. The fifth user instructed. I'll try. Midoriya replied uncertainly. When Izuku finally reached the entrance to UA, he was surprised to see that instead of Ryukyu it was Nijire waiting for him. It seemed that just as quickly as he caught sight of her, she sighted him as well. She smiled brightly as she started waving her hand. Izu! Over here, Izu! She shouted. Blushing in embarrassment at having a beautiful senpai call out for him, he quickly made his way towards her. Good morning, Hato-san dash. Nuh-uh. You have to call me Nijire or Nijire, senpai. She stated with a cute pout. We just met yesterday. Izuku squeaked as she got closer. Close enough that he could smell she used lavender shampoo recently. And? I already call you Izu, so you should call me by my name. She stated matter-of-factly. Okay, I'll try Nijire senpai. He replied, causing the girl to smile in triumph. Now I'm sure you're curious about where Ryukyu is, right? She asked, to which he nodded in agreement. She got caught up in a situation near her agency, so she's going to be late, if she can get here at all. Nijire explained. That's fine. Izuku stated, waving his hands in front of himself with wide eyes. I can imagine being a pro is busy enough, let alone running her own agency, and being in the top 10. Her schedule must be crazy even without random villain attacks. He replied. Nijire smiled at his understanding. Not to worry though. On the days Ryukyu can't make it, you'll be with me and my friends. Today we're heading to the gym. She cheered. As she ushered Izuku towards where the gym was, presumably, a question struck him. Senpai, what are you doing here? It's the weekend? He asked curiously. Oh, that. She waved a hand dismissively. All third years live in dorms. On campus. There's talks of extending that to the other years, but for now it's just for the graduating classes. She explained. Wow, really? He replied in genuine curiosity. As the pair made their way towards the gym, Izuku continued asking several questions about the school and its many facilities. He was amazed to learn that Ground Beta was only one of several similarly sized training facilities. When he asked how the school could possibly afford not only the construction but maintenance as well, Nijire stopped and began to ponder the question herself. This led to an entirely new discussion where the pair kept bouncing ideas back and forth. It was in the middle of this animated discussion that they arrived at the gym and were greeted by 3 other students. Oh god, that there's 2 of them now. The only girl among them stated with a hint of teasing. She had short reddish hair and red-brown eyes. Right ear also had 2 small piercings. Currently she was wearing the standard school tracksuit. "Hiya. You must be Midoriya." A blonde boy with a cheerful smile greeted. He was also wearing the school tracksuit, but instead of the regular top wore a tank top instead. "Hi, that's right, I'm Izuku Midoriya." Izuku greeted shyly. "Look Tamaki, he's like you." The boy pointed out, turning to the other boy who had elf-shaped ears and shaggy dark indigo hair. Only instead of being beside the boy, the now named Tamaki was on the far wall facing away from the group. "Too many people," he whispered. "Oh no you don't." Nijire pouted. "Come meet your fellow introvert." She cheered as she pulled Tamaki back towards the group. "Sorry about him, he's a bit shy." The girl stated with a small sigh. "Anyway, my name's Yu Heya, 3rd-year Hero Corps student." She introduced herself. "And I'm Mirio Togata. Nice to meet you Kohai." Mirio introduced himself with a smile and thumbs up. "It's nice to meet you all as well, thank you for letting me join you." Izuku replied with a small bow. "None of that." Yu waved off. "Nijire told us about this cute kid with an awesome quirk she was helping train and we got curious." She explained. "Oh right." Nijire gasped as she turned to Izuku, an excited gleam in her eye. "Have you gotten any more tickets?" Izuku's eyes widened as he realized he never rolled his ticket from last night. "Oh yeah, I got one last night," he shouted in realization. "Ee." Nijire squealed in excitement. "How did you get it? Did you fight someone? Oh, did you win some kind of contest?" She asked repeatedly before Yu covered her mouth. "Take a breath, girl." She chided lightly. "How did you get this ticket?" Mirio asked curiously. Izuku blushed slightly as he relayed the events of his trip home last night. Needless to say, the 4 were slightly impressed that Midoriya had stood up to the racist and protected the girl. Mirio smiled widely as he clapped the younger boy on the back. "Great job Kohai, I guess that guy was sent riding the rails," he stated before laughing at his joke. "Alone. Man, that wasn't very good," he stated, still smiling. Nijire, ignoring Mirio's horrible joke, pouted at Izuku. "You never traded contact details with me," she stated, looking like a jealous puppy. Sorry senpai, I just didn't think about it yesterday. We were busy training. Right? He offered, hoping to appease the older girl. Said older girl had other plans as she held out her hand and made a "give me" gesture. "Phone," she ordered, and Izuku complied immediately. In a couple of moments she had added his information to her contacts and sent him a text letting him have her information. Only when she was done did she smile at the greenette. "There, now you have my number," she cheered. "So," Yu started, giving Nijire a knowing look. "You can use these tickets to roll prizes? That's pretty neat, can you roll this one?" Yu asked curiously. "Sure," Izuku replied with building excitement. So far his rolls had been only abilities and a trait, so he was quite excited to see what a familiar would count as. Rolling silver familiar gacha ticket. An elite familiar. Durnhever. Rarity, fleet. An undead necromancer dragon that once served Alduin before being trapped in the soul cairn. As a dragon hailing from Tamriel, Durnhever is powerful, but his true power comes from the art of necromancy he has cultivated. Izuku simply stared into space as his mind processed what he had just read. A dragon, a real dragon. An undead, necromancer dragon. When he finally processed what he had just received, he turned to the group of 3rd years and said the only thing that came to mind. "I just got a necromancer dragon," he stated blankly. "What Ash?" Unfortunately their reply wouldn't be heard anytime soon, as an eerie purple mist started to form in the middle of the gym. The mist convulsed violently until it took the rough outline of a European dragon. In a flash of dimmed light the mist took physical form. What stood before the assembled group was a dragon of European design, the size of a house. The beast was gray-green in complexion, at least in the areas that flesh still clung to its body. There were some areas that had nothing more than bone with a shallow layer of withered flesh covering it. Its scales dripped and oozed a liquid none wished to discover as it stretched its wings, showing how utterly massive it was in comparison to the room. The group of 4 students and 1 student hopeful stood rigid as they waited for the massive beast to move. Dernhever's slitted eyes slowly glanced across the room. The light was annoyingly bright, though perhaps that was for spending some centuries trapped within the darkness of the soul Karen. He knew little by which means he was freed, but he would relish in the knowledge the ideal masters had their victory over him snatched away. Slowly his clouded vision began to clear, and he found himself in a strange room. Machines of metal and some of wire stood around the room, including under his bulk. It was of no inconvenience to a being of his stature, nothing like the uncomfortable piles of bone and stone cathedrals he could find purchase within the Karen. He was summoned, this much he could feel, and yet his summoner had not prepared a proper area for his arrival? He knew the practitioners of conjuration preferred pomp and pageantry to accompany their rituals. Had this one not done the same? His nose, used to the scent of rot and decay, almost immediately picked up the scent of the living. Turning his gaze into that direction, he found a group of adolescents, 4 of whom were nearing their adult years. It was the 5th that garnered his curiosity, an adolescent male with green hair and eyes. Was the boy's father a boss mare? It mattered little, for he smelled of his own kin and yet appeared human? Most curious. His nostrils flared as he huffed and spoke low, his voice powerful to the humans before him. Who has summoned me? The humans shuddered at the light frost that left his maw and grouped together, preparing for a fight. It was only the green-haired one that seemed to understand him. So the boy held the blood of dragons, did he, and yet that he did not feel the presence of the Dovahkian from him. I did, though not intentionally. He hesitantly replied. He was nervous, yet his eyes held a shine that could often be seen in the more scholarly of his kin. Who are you, hatchling? By what manner of sorcery have you pulled me from the soul Karen? Dernhever questioned inquisitively, though his tone remained respectful. He knew not what it was, but the longer his senses focused on the boy, the more he could feel his power. It was deep and burning, a source of magicka that patient yet roaring for release. His answer never came as the other adolescents interpreted their talk. Midoriya, that you can understand him? The one with hair of autumn leaves asked. Wait, you can't. The green one, Midoriya, questioned. I speak in the tongue of the Dova boy. For whatever reason you can understand me, are you perhaps of Dova descent? The others shivered at his words while Midoriya looked puzzled before a realization set in. Oh, it must be a benefit of Fire Dragon Slayer, he exclaimed. What? Dernhever asked sharply. Had man finally created a way to battle kind on even footing? It's not a long story. Midoriya sighed before starting an explanation that would leave the dragon more confused than before. He understood little of the words used to describe this boy's power. It smelled of the divines, yet he knew even they would not be able to pierce their realms so carelessly. What he did understand was that he was summoned as a familiar, possibly the first of many, and had appeared shortly after the boy was awarded the means to summon him. He grunted as he turned to a wall made of more glass than metal. If you are to be my summoner, then come, he ordered. Where are you going? Midoriya squawked in surprise. Dernhever turned to give the boy a defiant look. To test your mettle. My claws have rendered the flesh of innumerable foes, but I have never once been felled on the field of battle. We will see if you have the right to be my summoner. Without another word, Dernhever crashed through the wall and took to the air. Midoriya raced after the dragon, explaining what was happening to the others who followed as quickly as possible while trying to keep up. The month before UA's standard entrance exam was always busy, whether it be getting the third years settled into the dorms or combing through the massive number of applicants. This often left the staff with a variety of duties, most of which they had years of experience by this point, yet most of these duties grew tiresome with time. Though some found responsibilities that they rather enjoyed, most of which had nothing to do with paperwork. One such teacher was Pro Hero Snipe, Japan's very own American cowboy. It was this time of year that he almost always volunteered to escort the applicants that had passed the recommendation exams around campus. After all, he was a man whom enjoyed the simple things in life, firearms, Americana, and the looks of wonder as students explored his alma mater. Today, however, he was not enjoying what should have been one of his more leisurely days. With a quick snap of his wrist, the cylinder of his revolver snapped shut just in time for him to let off 3 shots. Each found their mark in the pure black skulls of walking, armored skeletons. He cursed silently as 4 more rounded the corner of the building. Today should have been simple: meet the 4 recommendation students, their parents, sister in the case of the Todorokis, and show them around campus. Halfway through the tour, however, they had walked through the courtyard and were set upon by the living dead. What the hell are these things? A girl with green hair and floating midsection cried as she flung a detached fist into an unarmored skeleton. Tokage. His mind supplied, the girl was working well with Hananuki to trap and destroy the undead as they came for them. They appear to be animated skeletons, but are they the product of an individual's emitter quirk or actual reanimated corpses? Yaoyorozu supplied as she batted away 3 more with a staff. They should have headed for the buildings, but Shoto Todoroki had put a glacier in the way when he trapped a small horde of the things. Now they were hemmed in and trapped between a glacier, a wall, and the undead. It was only the fact he had given the future students permission to use their quirks in self-defense that kept them from being overwhelmed, and even that advantage was being slowly stripped away. A larger horde, probably 20, had amassed and were slowly bearing down on them. The sound of roaring flames caught his attention as a body fell from the sky. He nearly cursed, fearing a new threat had appeared when the horde exploded in flames. Fire Dragon's wing attack. A figure screamed as a second, larger explosion. Flames burst outward like a typhoon. When the flames dispersed, a boy with green hair stood among scorched bones, panting slightly. Snipe didn't recognize the boy right away, but he had a suspicion he was the Midoriya kid that Nizu had informed the staff would be on campus. "Snipe-sensei." A voice he very much did recognize called out. Looking up, Nijire landed in front of the group. Her hair was slightly disheveled and she had what looked like light frost covering her shoulder. A faint glow of purple surrounded her, seeming to make her appear more exhausted with even the slightest of movements. "Hato, what in the Sam hell is going on?" he asked. "A dragon attack," she answered seriously, motioning towards the skeletons. "A necromancer dragon specifically. We were about to exercise with Midoriya, who I'm helping because Ryukyu couldn't make it today, when I asked him to use part of his quirk. It summoned a dragon, who told Midoriya to prove himself worthy of summoning him, who then flew off and started summoning these things," she explained rapidly. "But not before it hit me with some kind of draining attack. I'm really tired right now," she admitted. "Pardon?" Snipe asked after a few moments of silence, his mind struggling to comprehend the absurdity of the situation. "A dragon? That's so cool." Tokage cheered, only to wilt as her mother glared from behind her. "If it wasn't trying to kill us," she corrected, holding her hands in surrender. "Is everyone okay?" Midoriya asked as he ran up to the group. Now that Snipe got a better look at the kid, he didn't look too good. His clothes were slightly torn, he had a nasty gash on his cheek, and what looked like a claw mark on the right side of his shirt. Luckily the latter didn't appear to have broken skin, otherwise he's pretty sure the kid would have been a goner. Snipe turned his attention to his own group and was quite happy to see only some minor exhaustion. "Everyone's good here, kid, but how the heck did your quirk do this?" he asked. "Shouldn't someone at an institution such as UA already have control of their quirk to prevent such catastrophes?" Mr. Yaoyorozu asked curtly. The other parents and Todoroki's sister remained quiet, but he could tell they had the same question in mind. "I'm so sorry." Midoriya apologized as he bowed. "I only just got my quirk a few days ago and it's incredibly unpredictable," he explained before summarizing his quirk. Snipe was relieved to see the anger quickly dissipate from the adults and be replaced with a measure of understanding, though reluctant. He himself wasn't aware of the specifics of why Midoriya was on campus until now, but knowing helped put into perspective just how difficult Midoriya's quirk is to handle. "All right, first things first," he started as he reloaded again. "We get to cover somewhere more defensible than this and call in some support," he stated. "Sir." Midoriya cut in. "Durnavir, the dragon won't stop summoning these things unless he's distracted. He stated. Explain. Snipe ordered. We managed to find him a few minutes after this started. Heido, myself, Togata, Amajiki, and Heia were able to keep him occupied and caused a lull in the amount of skeletons he summoned. He managed to get away, but the difference was noticeable. He informed the pro hero. That's well and good, Midoriya, but if the 4 strongest of my upcoming 3rd years and yourself couldn't hold him down for long, no one on campus can do better. He explained. His tone was stern, but not dismissive. There's only a few staff here today and they're probably busy handling the skeletons. Midoriya can hold him down. Heido interjected. Snipe tried to reason with the girl but was interrupted. Midoriya wasn't using his full strength. She stated, giving the boy a knowing look. Too crowded. If he had used the 2nd stage of his ability, he would have left no room for us to fight. Midoriya could stall him so we can at least get everyone to safety. She explained. Snipe was quiet for a moment as he processed what his student had told him. On one hand, he wanted to outright deny it and order everyone to safety. On the other, he wasn't even sure how far they would make it if an even larger horde came for them. Most of the demed skeletons seemed to stay around the courtyard in the direction of their escape. Finally, he turned sharply to Midoriya, even through his gas mask, giving the boy a calculating look. Do you think you could find the dragon? He asked. To his credit, Midoriya didn't give any bravado and instead seemed to actually think. With enough time, yes, but we don't have time. The longer we wait, the more skeletons he'll summon and the harder an escape could be. It was then that Midoriya looked up sharply and his green irises seemed slitted now. But I can give him a reason to come to me, something too tempting to pass up. Goddamit. Snipe muttered. Fine, how long can you last at full power? As tired as I am right now and as much magic as I've exhausted. 15 minutes. He replied firmly. I'll give you 10 and then I better see you by those front gates. Snipe instructed with a weary sigh before clapping the boy on the shoulder. Head out, we'll be leaving a few minutes behind you. Midoriya nodded and started to walk away before breaking out into a run. Just as he found the room, he was engulfed in flames and a dragon took his place before it took to the skies. Did that guy just turn into a dragon? Juzo Hananuki asked, blinking to make sure his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Yep. Tokage replied with a wide smirk, a faint dusting of red on her cheeks. Okay, good, just making sure. There was a shift in the air. Its smell, the way it grew in temperature ever so slightly. Something was amiss. Magicada, he could practically taste the flames of destruction. He would know the flames of his kin anywhere, and yet these were different in a way, stronger perhaps. As he opened his maw to summon, more of the soul cairns met his hearing was suddenly assaulted. A roar, deep and booming, rattled the very air as it made itself known. Dernevir's eyes dilated, a feeling long since foreign to him set aflame in the depths of his rotted soul. A beat of his gaunt wings carried him upwards, his task forgotten, replaced by a primal urge. The urge to challenge an interloper, a trespasser to his new territory. He knew not how the hatchling had summoned another of his kin, but he would meet the interloper as only Dova knew how. Fire Dragon's roar. He was high in the sky, above even the strangely shaped stone and glass keep, when he was suddenly set upon. A breath of flame far denser if even his own kin slammed into his back, throwing him towards the earth. It was only the skill of having lived centuries that allowed him to correct himself. His wings drawing in gusts that would power a windmill for days as they kept him aloft by the slimmest of margins. When he looked above, his own biting frost building to be released, his eyes widened slightly. The Dova whom challenged him was not like his kin, it was larger, more bulk and muscle than all but one of his kin. Where they had their hind legs and wings, this one's wings were oriented towards its back and a set of arms, not unlike a human's, adorned its body. It was only slightly smaller in size than even the Thuri, the greatest of their kin. A pillar of frost shot from his maw only for the unknown Dova to shoot upwards. Durnevir gave chase, eager to bring this challenger low. In a few moments' time the pair of Dova became a tornado of fire and frost. They flew in circles, dodging the breaths of their opponent while attempting to gain the upper hand. A battle that Durnevir was slowly, but surely, winning. The Dova with scales of pure crimson was powerful and fast, but its inexperience began to show as well. Sharp turns and quick snaps to the side were clumsy and arduous as if it had never battled in the air before. It was thanks to this that it made a crucial error. In an attempt to avoid yet another blast of his frost breath, the Dova dived low. In doing so, it underestimated its own mass, sending itself spiraling out of control for several moments. This was the opportunity he had needed and he took full advantage of. Diving after the Crimson Dova, he drew close enough that even if it managed to correct itself, it would still be unable to avoid what was to come. "Hanlagus," he hissed, his voice low for his kin and yet to the mortals would still be quite booming. Izuku was starting to panic. He had me at to drag out his fight with Durnevir in the air and then lose him in the clouds. Unfortunately, he had severely underestimated the difficulty of a battle in the air and was almost immediately on the back foot. Durnevir was simply faster and far more well-versed in the ways of fighting like a dragon. When he dodged haphazardly, he cursed inwardly as he knew for sure he had just opened himself to an attack he wouldn't be able to avoid. Vanlichas. His panic only grew as a sudden chill, the kind that you get when you're subconsciously frightened, ran through his body. A purplish glow surrounded his body and his eyes widened even as they became heavier. This had been the same attack that had drastically burnt through Nijir's own stamina. As his body plummeted towards the ground and his strength left him, he was left with no other choice than to conserve what little energy he had left. In a cloak of flames, his body shifted back to human form, upon which Durnevir's eyes widened ever so slightly and Izuku could see the slightest hint of respect in the elder dragon's gaze. Yet once again they hardened as he accelerated his dive, quickly making a great deal of distance between himself and Izuku. Just as Izuku had thought the dragon had left him to plummet to his death, he caught sight of him once again. This time he was flying straight up, on an intercept course with Izuku. As the dragon opened his jaws and a misting of frost began to form, so did an idea. One that could possibly save Izuku's life and if not at least ensure his death wasn't by ingestion. Ninth, this is insane. Shinomori warned in panic. Not like he has many other options. Nana shouted back, projecting a sense of assurance towards Izuku. Go for it, ninth. Time slowed to a crawl, a pillar of frost grew closer and closer. 15 meters. I have to time this right. 10 meters. Not yet. 6 meters. Ninth. 4 meters. Not yet. 2 meters. Now. Just as he could feel the cold touch of the frost, Izuku inhaled. Relying purely on instinct provided by his ability, he inhaled from deep within his gut as if trying to swallow the frost whole. The cold that greeted him wasn't what he had expected. Instead, it was a feeling so cold that it started to burn. His throat felt as though it was on fire, and yet even as he screamed in pain, he inhaled. In moments his body was partially encased in ice as he continued to plummet towards the rapidly approaching dragon. However, the encroaching numbness soon faded, the feeling a freezing burn to a dull cooling sensation. Before he had even realized what was happening, his body was in motion. His mouth opened to release a scream, the NOA roar that was far more animal than even his previous ones. Cold flame dragon's roar. Flames of glacier blue accompanied his roar, catching his opponent off guard, slamming into him and sending the dragon hurtling towards the earth at breakneck speeds. The combined force of his attack and the dragon's mass cratered the earth beneath it, almost double Durnevir's size. His body rigid, his energy depleted, and his mind very much shutting down, Izuku was about to meet a similar fate when at the last moment he was scooped up in the arms of Togata. Appearing to bounce out of the ground itself, his senpai grabbed him in a tackle that broke his fall and took them both tumbling several meters. As he lay there, the cold, hard ground suddenly felt as though it was made of clouds. You did good, Kohai. Togata praised, appearing to squat over Izuku with a thumbs up and a beaming smile. Izuku would have liked to reply, but found himself slipping into the sweet relief of unconsciousness. The last thing to fill his vision was a notification from the Gacha. Feat achieved. Defeat Durnevir +1 Platinum Ability Gacha ticket. The first thing Izuku became aware of when he opened his eyes was that he was in the nurse's office again. The second was that he was in pain. A lot of pain. His throat felt as if he had swallowed an entire buffet's worth of shaved ice, downed an entire container's worth of wasabi, and started jumping around a bounce house to shake it together. The rest of his body was no better, as even trying to move caused who knows what bones to creak in protest. He could already see where several larger bruises were starting to form along his arms, and he could feel the ones on his chest and back. Though considering just what he had fought, he should probably consider himself lucky. Hey, look who's awake," an unfamiliar voice stated, causing Izuku to look around the room. When he couldn't see anybody, he was beginning to assume he was hearing things until an object, a human head, floated from the ceiling. "Here I am." She cheered with a slight smirk, probably half expecting him to freak out. Which, to be fair, normally he would have, but currently he was tired and sore. Freaking out could be future Izuku's problem. Instead he blinked once, twice, and a third time before speaking. "Is that your quirk? That's really cool. Does it let you separate your head from your body, or does it also allow you to separate multiple body parts? Is there a distance limit, or maybe a limit to the number of pieces you can separate? What happens if the separated limb gets damaged?" he asked while suddenly sitting up, the pain ignored now that he was faced with a new and amazing quirk. The girl's eyes lit up as her smirk widened significantly. "The name's Setsuna Tokage, and you and I are going to get along swell, dragon boy," she purred while bringing her head closer to him. He blushed, realizing that an attractive girl was invading his personal space, one that didn't mind his questions either. It was then that the office door slammed open and several people entered at once. First was Recovery Girl, followed by Snipe, Midnight, a woman who he assumed to be Tokage's mother, as she was forcefully pushing a headless body in front of her, the man in an expensive-looking business suit that had momentarily admonished him earlier, and a very attractive raven-haired young woman Izuku's age who was currently covering her face as if she was watching something scandalous. My, what do we have here?" Midnight purred, causing him to blush and start to shake his hands defensively at the possible misunderstanding. Thankfully he was saved by Mrs. Tokage. "Nemuri." The woman with short, forest green hair and sky-blue eyes growled warningly. Her eyes then focused on her daughter. "Setsuna. Tokage. Get your head back on your shoulders this instant, and for heaven's sake give the boy some personal space." Her voice left little room for argument, and yet Setsuna pouted. "But Mom, he's a greenie too, and he can turn into a dragon," she whined even as her head floated to reattach to her body. "Plus he was starting to ask some really good questions about my quirk. He practically figured out the core functions with a glance." Midnight chuckled slightly as she walked over to help Recovery Girl get him situated again in the bed. "From what I've seen, that's pretty on brand for Midoriya. You should see his notebook sometime," she stated, the last part giving him a teasing smirk. "Notebooks?" Setsuna asked with a smirk that matched Midnight's. "Oh yes, he's got notebooks that break down tons of quirks that he's seen," the heroine replied, causing Izuku to look away in embarrassment. He really didn't like bringing up his notebooks in public, especially on account of how his classmates usually responded. "They're not that great," he stated. Midnight was about to say something when Recovery Girl whacked her thigh with her cane. An annoyed huff left the older heroine before she spoke. "That's enough teasing the boy," she chided. "If you want to set him up with your niece, you can do that when he's not my patient," she goaded with her own slight smirk. "Please don't give either of them any ideas," Mrs. Tokage told Recovery Girl. "They're a handful as is," she muttered with a fond, yet exasperated, sigh. Recovery Girl turned her attention back to him. "So how are you feeling, dearie?" she asked while grabbing a clipboard. "Sore. My throat in particular is pretty raw. Other than that, I don't think I had any major injuries." "How's everyone else?" he asked in worry. "Everyone's fine, just some light scrapes and bruises." Hato was actually exhausted. Whatever that overgrown lizard of yours did seemed to sap her energy right up, she explained while making some notes. "Otherwise she's fine and currently resting in her dorm," she added. Izuku sighed in relief. He was incredibly lucky that no one had been seriously hurt. "Everyone," He started before turning the best he could towards those gathered. I'm so sorry for what happened, I'll take any punishment deemed necessary. He stated while bowing. Everyone was quiet for a few moments as the mood was suddenly quite solemn. The silence was finally broken when Snipe walked over and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, causing him to sit up. There's no punishment coming your way, kid. Snipe stated. I had a chat with Midnight and Nizu, they explained your quirk in more detail. We also explained it to those affected, which thankfully were only a handful of teachers and the recommendation students and their folks. He explained. That's correct. The man in the suit stated. In fact, it's I who owe you an apology, Mr. Midoriya. I should not have snapped at you quite the way I did. It was a tense situation and I was quite worried for my and my daughter's safety. The man stated while giving a small bow. And no, that's okay. Izuku replied, waving his hands. Considering the circumstances, your reaction was more than justified, Mr. Yaoyorozu, Takashi Yaoyorozu. Mr. Yaoyorozu introduced himself. This is my daughter Momo. He motioned to the girl who gave Izuku an awkward smile. It's nice to meet you, Midoriya. Please don't worry. We really don't hold the incident against you. She assured. Neither do we. Mrs. Tokage added. Just in case it wasn't obvious. I guess it was just a bit of bad luck. She shrugged before smiling at her daughter. Besides, Suna would never let me hear the end of it if I held a grudge against someone that could show her a real dragon in person. Being right, the only thing worse would be if it was a dinosaur. She replied with a grin. Alright, that's enough. Everyone can see everyone is fine, so now I need to finish Midoriya's checkup. Recovery Girl stated, looking pointedly at the door. The white mage has spoken, let's get y'all on your ways. Snipe announced, receiving a few chuckles and a smug grin from Recovery Girl. Catch ya later, Dragon Boy, Setsuna called as she followed her mother and aunt out of the room. I hope to see you when the school term begins, Midoriya. Momo stated as she politely gave her own farewell. Soon the last person left was Takashi Yaoyorozu, who smiled enigmatically. Get well soon, Mr. Midoriya. I'll be watching your progress with great interest. He stated before following his daughter. Soon it was just himself and Recovery Girl left in the room. A fact that allowed him to sigh in relief, an action that agitated his throat once again. He had been very worried that Dernivir had harmed someone and was grateful to find it wasn't the case at all. The thought did bring a question to mind though. Recovery Girl, what happened to Dernivir after I blacked out? He asked with some worry. According to Togata, the lizard disappeared. It faded to purple mist right after you went down for the count. She replied with a thoughtful frown. Why, do you think he's still around? She questioned. Izuku frowned before remembering his status. There's one way to check. He stated before calling for his status. Status / Name, Izuku Midoriya. Race, human. Current tickets. Platinum, ability X1. Abilities / Active, 1-1. Fire Dragon Slayer. Storage. Skills / Traits / SXL Calibration. Familiars / Dernivir, in storage. Item storage. Both Izuku and Recovery Girl let out sighs of relief at the confirmation that Dernivir was in storage at the moment. They agreed that for now he could stay there until his next training session with Ryukyu. So, dearie, are you gonna roll that new ticket? Recovery Girl asked as she was finishing his checkup. She had healed his minor bruising with her quirk and his throat was mostly healed, but he would be tired and sore for at least another day. Izuku thought about it for a few moments. This ticket was an ability ticket, so the chances of getting something dangerous were minimal, but not entirely zero. Of course, considering what happened, he should probably wait and roll it tomorrow when he was supervised. Then again, he would have to actively slot it into his ability slot, so he should be okay, right? I'll go ahead and roll it. He stated more to himself than Recovery Girl. Rolling Platinum Ability Gacha Ticket. An epic ability. Rarity, Epic Class, Changer, Passive, Emitter. Allows you to clone yourself and operate your bodies as a hive mind. You can use your abilities from anybody you control, but maintaining clones costs energy, Not too much but enough to be noticeable and will really add up if you use more than a few for long PRDS of time. Izuku blinked, opened his mouth to say something, and promptly shut it again when nothing would come out. He thought he should probably get used to the idea that anytime he rolls the gacha there's a chance he'll gain a power that might as well be one of the top 100 quirks of all time. Clones that can use his abilities on their own and form a hive mind, the possibilities were practically endless. He was abruptly yanked back from jumping down the rabbit hole that would have unfurled by the deceptively powerful force of an old woman's cane. Seriously, how did a woman so small pack such a punch? I don't even know what you got, but I know that look by now. You better not do any testing, training, or theorizing until you have proper supervision tomorrow. Recovery Girl warned, her cane held up slightly, the or else left unsaid. Izuku nodded sheepishly as he waited for Recovery Girl to finish her work. It wouldn't take but a few more minutes, but the entire time he could feel the piercing star of Recover Girl watching him closely. He wasn't that bad, right? Almost an hour later Izuku was in Mizudafu, walking towards the cafe that Tsunatori had sent him the address of. As it turned out he knew the place. It was a quaint little Western-style cafe that a lot of tourists frequented. It was also only a few blocks from his apartment complex, so his mother had stopped by before and told him about it. The prices were slightly higher than most cafes in the area, but it was also a hotspot for tourists that wanted a little slice of home in Japan. Now that he thinks about it, that's probably why Tsunatori chose this particular place. Arriving at his destination, he walked inside and spotted Tsunatori sitting at a corner booth reading what looked like a manga. Walking over, he smiled as he greeted her. "Good afternoon, Tsunatori." For her part, Pony's head snapped up as she unexpectedly heard someone address her in English. Upon seeing Izuku, she smiled and waved while putting her book away. "Hi, Izuku," she greeted before taking a moment to actually look him over. "Wow, you look rough. Did something happen?" she asked in concern. He smiled sheepishly. Kind of," he answered hesitantly. "I was doing some training and had a problem with my quirk. Everything's okay now though," he explained. "Understandable, it took me forever to get the hang of my quirk," she comforted with a slightly embarrassed admission. "So what are we doing?" she asked. Izuku smiled as he opened his bag and took out several books. Some of the books were regular textbooks and others were some manga that he had recently bought. "I have a few ideas, but I wanted to see just what your interests were. That way we could figure out a plan that would both keep you engaged and help you pick up Japanese at a decent pace, especially with the entrance exams coming up in a month," he explained. "Admittedly, I'm a bit of an otaku. It's sort of the other half of why I came to study in Japan," she sheepishly admitted. "I love both anime and manga, but I prefer anime more honestly." Izuku nodded. "There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Truthfully, I'm a bit of a fanboy for heroes," he admitted, causing the girl to smile at him while giggling a bit. "I can see it. Let me guess, All Might?" she asked, causing him to blush. How did you know?" he squeaked in embarrassment, causing her to giggle more as she pointed out the folders in his bag that were all Might themed. "Well, I don't think we can watch anime in here without being rude, but we can read," he stated, changing the topic. Placing the stack of manga between them, he started to explain his plan. They would read through a book together, translating as they went along. When they finished a book, they would discuss the different uses of phrases and how grammar functioned. Pony practically beamed as she quickly snatched up one of the books and moved to sit beside Izuku. He blushed, but chalked it up to her being excited. Until he read the title of the book, The 100 Girlfriends Who Really Love You. How did that get in there? He wondered to himself. It hadn't been one of the books he had picked up before. Little did Izuku know that within his mindscape Nana was particularly enjoying his embarrassment. She had seen the evil glint he had missed when he told his mother he was helping a foreign girl learn Japanese, and when Inko had slipped the book into his bag. To be young again. Oh well, this would be an interesting time itself. Izuku let out a steady breath to calm his nerves. He had walked this same path every day for an entire month, and yet now it seemed more imposing than ever. Idly he noted some of the student hopefuls that passed him by without sparing him a glance. There had to be a couple hundred people attending today. He took another steady breath and let a small smile creep onto his face. It had been a busy month, possibly even busier than all his time training with All Might combined. Though to be fair, most people don't have to train the equivalent of 3 quirks. In that area, Ryukyu, or Ryuko as she wanted to be called when not in public, had been a godsend. The Dragoon hero was a natural-born teacher and guided him through a plethora of practical and theoretical uses for his abilities. She even encouraged his natural observational skills, stating that dissecting a quirk like he could would be invaluable in the future. Needless to say, she had become something of a major mentor for him. It was not strange, to be honest. She taught him, encouraged him, and he respected her, but at the same time it felt different to his mentorship under All Might. When he had brought it up during one of his sessions with Midnight, she had simply smiled mischievously while pointing out that Ryuko was the first truly positive female influence in his life outside his mother. There had been something else, something she left unsaid but assured him it was better for him to come to terms with it himself. That had been another development. At the gentle but firm insistence of his mother, he began therapy. Now twice a week he would visit Midnight's office and have sessions with her. It was an ongoing process, but he felt like progress was being made. It helped that he had plenty of work to distract himself between training sessions. Dernivir had, much to Izuku's surprise, been rather jovial when he was summoned again. Apparently Izuku's ability to take on a dragon form had excited his scholarly interests. Thus the dragon had been adamant that he start teaching Izuku the Thursdayum, or shouts as humans of his world called it. Unfortunately, it was a slow process, even with his intrinsic understanding of the Dova language provided by Fire Dragon Salyer. In the month since his training had started, he had only learned how to use a singular word, gon, or stamina. Though it seemed like a small achievement, it was apparently enough to earn a silver skill ticket, one that he had yet to use. What time wasn't spent learning from Dernivir or training his abilities was spent hanging out with his senpai or pony. Nijire was adamant that he spend time with her and her friends, so when he passed the entrance exam, because in her mind he couldn't possibly fail, he would know the campus like the back of his hand. Truthfully, Izuku found himself unable to say no to the brunette. Thus he had made friends for the first time in a long time. Tamaki was still shy around him, but seemed to appreciate his willingness to sit in silence and not pressure him for conversation. Mirio had become something of an older brother figure, taking it upon himself to show his kohai the ropes and provide advice. Yuyu had taken a similar role, acting as an older sister and tended to rein in the chaos Nijire and Mirio would bring when they got excited. Speaking of Nijire, she was easily the person he was closest to out of the group. They trained together often, and would spend time going back and forth with rapid-fire conversations that even the vestiges had difficulty following, and they could hear most of his thoughts. If he were honest, he was going to be a little sad they couldn't spend as much time together when school starts. "Hey Izzy!" He was snapped out of his inner musing when a familiar voice called out his name. Smiling, he turned to greet Pony, another who he had come to view as a friend. "Good morning, Pony," he greeted, resisting the urge to call her by her family name. She had been pretty vivid about the ways she would use to make him stop if he kept that habit after the first week and a half of their sessions. "Have you used your ticket yet?" she whispered conspiratorially, glancing around to see if anyone had heard her. He smiled at her excitement. Ever since telling her about his quirk, she seemed to gamble vicariously through him. The fact he had gotten a sliver advantage item ticket from teaching her Japanese seemed to egg her on even more. "Not yet. I wanted to wait before the practical. I wouldn't want the proctors to think I smuggled an item in," he explained. She nodded with a smile and was about to say something when he heard someone trip. Turning around, he was just in time to catch a pretty brunette who had apparently tripped over a brick sticking up slightly. "Oh, thanks," the girl stated with a slight blush, and Izuku suddenly realized he was still holding on to her. "Oh, sorry," he replied while making sure she was okay on her feet. "Don't be, it would have been bad luck to fall flat on my face before a big test." She chuckled in embarrassment. He chuckled a little as well. "That's true," he agreed. "Oh, I'm Izuku Midoriya and this is Pony Tsunatori." He introduced himself and Pony, the latter of whom waved politely and gave a quick hello. "It's nice to meet you, I'm Achiko Uraraka," she greeted before starting back towards the entrance. "I don't want to be late, but it was nice meeting you, Midoriya," she shouted behind her. Izuku smiled and waved after her, happy with his progress that he hadn't completely frozen up when a girl literally fell into his arms. Meanwhile, Pony was pouting slightly as the brunette had just snatched away Izzy's attention. It was bad enough that Hato girl was obviously interested in him and now another possible interest. We haven't even started and I already have enough competition. She muttered to herself. Everything okay, Pony? Izuku asked, causing her to perk up. All good, we should probably get to our testing rooms. She replied with a newfound smile. Everything would be fine, it's not like she would have to worry about Uraraka suddenly developing feelings for her crew friend, right? As the pair walked away, they were oblivious to the murderous stare of an ash blonde whose hands smoked slightly, releasing the slightest aroma of caramel. Normally he would have instantly exploded, literally and figuratively, at seeing the waste of space Deku at UA, but Katsuki knew the rat was probably watching him. Deku. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. It wouldn't matter, UA would see just how useless the quirkless waste was and give him the boot. Then his shot to the top would be clear without Deku weighing him down. It was little wonder why UA was considered the top hero school in Japan. If the test he had just taken was any indication of what the coming school year would be like for students, then Izuku could only imagine the average academic scores of the general education department. Graduates like All Might, Endeavor, and Snipe kept the school at the top in the world of heroics, but the general education department was what kept it as an academic giant. Thankfully, the written exam was now behind him as he and the other remaining applicants were shuffled into a large auditorium. Following his assigned number, he found that he was sitting between a girl with pigtails and a girl whose quirk appeared to be a physical mutation of sorts. She had short purple hair with elongated earlobes in the form of earphone jacks. Once everyone was seated, a man whom Izuku instantly recognized walked onto the stage at the front of the room. "Hello, my examinee listeners." The energetic man dressed as a rock star cried out in greeting. "I'm here to explain the rules of your practical, so listen up, little listeners." "Wow, present Mike," Midoriya stated quietly to himself. Mentally he was listing off facts about the pro that he had picked up from both research and the man's radio show. "He's a teacher here, pretty cool." The girl with earphone jacks agreed with his excitement, though she just gave a nod and small smile. Izuku knew he should be listening more closely, but couldn't help himself as he spoke again. "I know, it's pretty amazing he can juggle teaching, being a pro, and having his own radio show." The girl smirked and nodded her head in agreement. She opened her mouth to whisper something, but the girl on Izuku's other side snapped. "Can you two please be quiet, some of us are trying to listen?" she whispered harshly. Izuku gave a sheepish smile before whispering a quick apology and turned to listen to present Mike again. "That's right, listeners, you'll have 10 minutes in one of our mock cities to disable any of the 3 types of faux villains and earn as many points as possible." Mike gestured excitedly towards the images appearing on screen as he spoke. Of course, attacking other examinees is strictly prohibited and will result in an immediate disqualification. The final image depicted 3 types of robots that would be acting as the faux villains in silhouettes. However, there was a 4th type of robot that was shown to be worth 0 points. Idly, Izuku wondered if there was a hidden purpose behind having a faux villain that was worth nothing. Knowing what little he did about Principal Nizu, it's likely there was a multi-layered answer. "Excuse me." A tall boy with short, dark blue hair and glasses stood stiffly. On the handout there are 4 faux villains listed. Such an error is unbecoming of an institution of UA's standing, he argued before turning sharply towards Izuku and the girls sitting to either side of him. "Furthermore, your whispering is distracting to those around you. If you 3 cannot take this seriously, then please leave immediately," he scolded. The girl with pigtails looked incensed at being included in the boy's rant. However, before she could speak, the girl with short purple hair spoke first. "Hey, stuff it, JRK. We weren't the ones standing up and interrupting present Mike about something he was clearly about to address," she shouted back, causing the boy to stutter incoherently. "Oh, whoa, little listeners. Let's chill," Mike scolded lightly, causing the boy to sit down. "The 4th faux villain is worth 0 points, a gimmick if you will. There's only one at each site and it'll rampage and cause destruction when active. He warned with a smirk. Though this year there's a special twist, anyone that attacks the zero-pointer loses all their points. He explained. A murmur went through the crowd as everyone questioned the point of even having the zero-pointer in the test. Some thought it was to force out the cocky, reckless types while others figured it was to simulate knowing when to retreat. Izuku, himself didn't believe either theory, though he didn't have one of his own yet. Alright, now go plus ultra. Mike cheered, getting some of the crowd to do so as well. A 15-minute bus ride later, they were given time to change into workout clothes first. Izuku found himself standing outside testing Site A. Though Izuku knew it by a different name, Training Ground Beta. By this point Izuku had seen several of the UA's gargantuan training grounds, and yet he still couldn't get over the sheer size. At least this was one he had plenty of experience with, though that was without any opposition. Taking in a breath, he started some light stretches and mentally mapping out the training ground. They were on the south side and the robots would probably be evenly distributed throughout the entire site, at least until the first punch was thrown. Undoubtedly the bots would start to move accordingly, meaning if he wanted to have the best chance at getting enough points, he would need to get ahead of the crowd and get deeper into the testing site. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the girl that had sat to his right in the auditorium was in his group, as were Uraraka and the boy with blue hair and glasses. Focus up, ninth. Nana chastised lightly. Yes, Mom. He replied back with a hint of sarcasm. Oi, respect your mother, brat. Banjo admonished, but Izuku could feel he was practically laughing himself silly. It had become something of a running joke that Nana took up a motherly role over the past month, not that she complained. Alright kid, let's get serious. Nana chimed in, cutting Banjo out until he could get his laughter under control. You should go ahead and use those tickets. 10 minutes isn't a lot of time and a few seconds could cost you a point or 10. She explained. I agree with Nana. Shinomori added. 2 tickets drastically increases your odds, and in the event they are bad rolls, the lost time if you wait could be detrimental. All right. Izuku agreed and the vestiges cut the connection, allowing him to prepare. Let's roll the skill ticket first. Rolling silver skill gacha ticket. A common skill. Novice stealth. You are a novice in the way of stealth, you know how to mask your footsteps, how to sneak up on people, how to check for traps, and how to gather information more effectively. But anyone actually involved in the field is better than you. Huh. Izuku blinked. It was a little mundane, maybe? But at the same time it'll be useful later on, he supposed, and maybe even now depending on how well programmed the robot sensors are. Alright, let's roll the advantage ticket. Rolling advantage silver item gacha ticket. An uncommon item. Ring of steel protection. Rarity. Uncommon. This ring belonged to the Night King Rendell. It grants its wearer protection by boosting defense against physical attacks. A rare item. Beauregard amulet. A Gaia Titan scout, Beauregard Titans are often used outside of battle as companions by seekers for both their keen senses and ability to maintain morale. Their special ability, Speak, allows them to hold off or intimidate opponents. Okay, either one of these would be amazing. Unfortunately, he could only pick one, and while extra defense would always be welcome, he couldn't turn down something that would be able to work independently from himself. Especially something specializing in scouting and in possession of enhanced senses. Having made his choice, a small metal amulet appeared in his hand. It was a small piece of silver-like metal surrounding a light green gem, the base of which resembled a spiked dog collar. However, its looks were secondary to the sensation he could feel as soon as it made contact with his skin. It was magic. Having spent almost a month learning a portion of the art from Durnevere, he could recognize it in such close proximity. Now in his hand, a name came to the forefront of his mind unbidden. Beauregard, the creature, Titan, within wanted to be released to meet its new master. Hearing the grinding of heavy metal doors, Izuku quickly put the amulet around his neck. Beauregard would have to wait, for now he had a test to focus on. Looks like a good crop of youngins this year. Snipe stated as he leaned back in his chair while watching the bank of monitors displaying the various testing sites. Agreed, Some are smart and using their quirks to scout the situation before making a move. 13 stated, her tone approving as she watched a pair of students in Site A using their quirks to find isolated or pairs of bots. Some are playing to their strengths quite well. Cementas added, motioning towards the monitor showing Tenya Ida, the younger brother of Ingenium, quickly attacking stranglers or outliers of a group of bots. And some are natural-born warriors. Vlad King declared while bringing up 2 feeds side by side. A small pop-up at bottom of each providing the applicants' names and relative information. The first was of Katsuki Bakugu in Site C standing amongst a pile of destroyed bots. His palms smoking while glaring at a group of approaching bots. The boy charged forth and began letting loose explosions straight into the metal opposition. The manner of which he attacked was almost feral, yet planned, as he smiled widely as each attack connected with one of the foe villains. The second monitor displayed Izuku Midoriya mid-jump as he fired a burst of flames from his feet to get behind a 3-pointer and unleash a pillar of flames from his mouth, destroying its entire midsection. He landed in a roll and righted himself before delivering a fiery punch to a 1-pointer that attempted to pounce on him, obliterating its head. Maybe, however, it's clear these two have some key differences in approach. Ectoplasm replied as he watched Midoriya rush towards a boy that had shorted himself out with his electricity quirk. Midoriya suddenly created 2 more versions of himself, the first getting the attention of a 1-pointer that was about to target the boy. Meanwhile, the original distracted a second 1-pointer while the other copy grabbed the boy. Not bad, he got the other applicant out of the way while minimizing the risk of injury. 13 appraised. But what's with him switching from fire to clones? A dual quirk of some kind perhaps? Cementas asked curiously. Nah, it's all one quirk. Snipe answered while watching Midoriya find the off switches they had installed for those with non-combat quirks. Kid's got a weird quirk that can give him more abilities over time, among other things. He stated while remembering what he had dubbed the zombie incident. That's illogical. Aizawa chimed in. Quirks are only capable of manifesting in a singular manner outside of dual quirks. It can be manipulated, but quirks can only present in a singular way. Under his mask, Snipe rolled his eyes at the scruffy man and shook his head. Logic hangs itself when it regards Midoriya. He replied. How do you know him? Aizawa asked with a raised eyebrow, and Snipe could see the partial challenge for what it was, an accusation. Again under his mask he rolled his eyes in annoyance. He and Aizawa had never gotten along past respect as colleagues, and the stunt the man had pulled last year with his class did little to improve his opinion of the underground hero. Seen him around campus, he's been getting quirk counseling here for the last month. Snipe explained. Didn't seem right to mention the zombie incident right now, especially considering Aizawa was the type to stick to any flaw he found. Ah yes. Lunch Rush snapped his fingers in realization. He's the boy Ryukyu's been helping. Correct. Nizu stated from his place near the middle of the room. Izuku Midoriya was a late bloomer with an unpredictable quirk, and therefore I extended an invitation for him to have counseling where he could make use of our facilities. He explained in his usual chipper tone. Is that why yourself and Nemuri are abstaining from voting this time? Vlad asked. Correct again, it wouldn't do to have any form of bias taint the results of a promising applicant. The principal smoothly explained. The hell? Upon hearing 13's muttered curse of surprise, everyone looked back at the monitor bank to see that Midoriya, holding a silver necklace of some kind, had summoned a canine-like creature that resembled a bulldog. The dog proceeded to start sniffing before letting out a series of barks and taking off with another Midoriya clone in pursuit. I wonder if that's a new familiar? Nizu questioned to himself nonchalantly. Hitting the off switch to another 2-pointer, Izuku paused to survey his surroundings. Seeing that he was in the clear for now, he decided to take a moment to catch his breath and tally his score. He had kept a decent pace for the first half of his test and had managed to score about 40 points before he saved the guy with the electricity quirk. Afterwards, he had found that the foe villains had off switches on their bodies. Deciding to swap tactics, he decided to employ a small force of clones, 15 originally, now 10, to spread out and make quicker work of the robots. A plan that had so far seen a great deal of success, both because he was roughly up to 70 points in half the time it took him to get his original 40 and he had managed to help a few of his fellow applicants that were in over their heads. He currently had 2 clones redirected to follow Beauregard and solely focus on helping applicants. The downside was that he was almost at his limit. The mental feedback of 15 clones was manageable at first, but as they split up further the different streams of information were beginning to mount. He had dismissed 3 that hadn't had their hands busy and 2 more took enough damage they voluntarily dismissed themselves. The flow of information was manageable again, but still a building headache. Shaking his head, he started moving. He only had roughly 5 minutes left and he needed to make the most of his time. As he took off into a run, he rounded a corner to see the girl with pigtails backing up as a 2-pointer was about to hit her. His eyes widened as he realized he wouldn't make it in time to block the hit or hit the off switch. Abilities / Active 1-1. Epic Clone Legendary Fire Dragon Slayer. Knowing his clones were all free at the moment, he swapped to his only option. Fire Dragon's Roar. He shouted as he unleashed a blast of flame that knocked the 2-pointer across the street and into a building. "Are you okay?" he asked the girl as he ran up to her. "What the hell? I had that," she yelled, her face contorted in anger. Izuku began to sputter, unaware of what she meant. It had looked like the 2-pointer was about to crush her. "I thought it was going to hit you?" "No," she cried as she palmed her forehead. "I was trying to get it to hit the hydrant," she complained, motioning to the fire hydrant behind her. "The hydrant?" he asked slowly. "I need water for my quirk and I've spent 2 med long trying to trick one of those bots into hitting one of these," she argued in frustration. "Minute. Sorry, I thought you were in trouble," he apologized. "Ugh," she grunted in frustration. Suddenly a thought came to Izuku and he walked past the girl. For her part, Chikuchi Togaike was peeved. Why was it that everyone either had to be a white knight or steal from her? First, she had been prevented from bringing in her water bottle. Then she had wasted 3 minutes trying to trick a robot into destroying any kind of water source she could find. That plan had blown up when each and every one was destroyed by someone else. Luckily, she had seen the off switches and had managed to get at least 10 points, but it was too slow. She'd never be able to get into the hero course at the rate she was going, so she went back to her original plan, only in a more secluded area. It was just her luck that she would be saved once again, and just as she had gotten so close, by the green-haired kid she had chewed out earlier too. She grimaced as she realized she had done it again, but she was frustrated. She was about to turn around and at least offer a half-hearted apology when something wet hit her shoulder. Turning around, her eyes widened as she saw that the kid with green hair had ripped the fire hydrant out of the ground and water was spraying everywhere. He turned around and simply bowed while chuckling sheepishly. "Sorry I messed up your plan, I hope this helps," he stated before taking off towards the main road. Hearing the sound of metal tracks, she turned as a 3-pointer came to face her. Her shocked expression turned into a confident grin as she took control of the water surrounding her. "Green the First don't know your name, but if I make it into the hero course I'll owe you one," she mentally promised before attacking the robot. "Not bad," Vlad stated with a slight nod of approval. "Indeed, how many rescue points does that make already?" Cementos agreed, the corners of his lips upturned slightly. "Enough to ensure he would make it into the hero course on those points alone." Power Loader replied with a slight grimace as he watched the boy sear away the midsections of 3 1-pointers at once. "I'll be busy for the next few weeks," he mentally lamented, knowing it would be his responsibility to fix what could be salvaged. At least the support course will have plenty of opportunities for extra credit. "I believe it's time we began to wrap this up," Nizu stated with a growing smile. Oh, how he loved this part of the practical. Slamming his paw down on a large red button on the center console, the amalgamation of Quirk and Rodent began to cackle as student hopefuls began to panic at the sudden rumbling. 35, 38, 42, that should be enough, but I still have a few minutes, Achiko thought to herself, mentally tallying her points as she ran down the main road. She had gotten lucky, Her quirk was already almost at its limit and she would have just barely had under 30 points if it hadn't been for discovering the off buttons on accident. She allowed herself to smile slightly. She knew her score wouldn't be the highest, but she was certain it would at least see her into the hero course. Though a few more points just to be sure would hurt. It was only the sudden rumbling that seemed to shake the entire faux city that broke her attention on the task of finding more robots. She paused momentarily as it happened again and nearly sent her tumbling to the ground. Having caught her balance, she looked up only for her eyes to widen. There, striding from the center of the test area, was a behemoth of metal and circuitry that towered over even the tallest buildings. Unfortunately, it seemed she wasn't the only one to notice. What the hell is that thing? It's the zero-pointer. Run! Her attention on the obviously gargantuan faux villain was abruptly interrupted as the other examinees all began flooding away from it. What was once loosely organized chaos became panicked mayhem as everyone turned to flee all at once. Achiko herself attempted to turn and flee to the safety of the starting area when she heard a loud groaning of metal. Having been raised on and around numerous construction sites due to her parents' company, she was well acquainted with the sounds of failing infrastructure. Her head snapped to the noise as a form of primal fear took hold. She hadn't the time to react when a damaged light pole slammed into a corner of the building closest to it. Already damaged from the exam, concrete shattered and spilled forth like a dam burst, knocking her over and onto her back. She screamed in surprise and fear as she suddenly found herself pinned, the lower half of her body buried under rubble. She tried to pull herself free and was rewarded with a sharp pain jolting through her leg. Her quirk was also a futile attempt as she had long passed her limits and found herself unable to even slightly raise the rubble. A shadow loomed over her and her eyes widened as the zero-pointer approached. "Help! Please somebody help me!" She cried out as it moved towards her position. The few examinees who had heard her yelling stood frozen in horror, unable to move and yet sure someone else would save the girl. Others believed the examinees had precautions in place to prevent an unfortunate accident. Unbeknownst to the latter was the fact the observation room was in a panic as the zero-pointer failed to register Achiko's thermal signature due to the debris surrounding her. "Sheet! Hold on!" A voice cried out as footsteps rushed towards Achiko. Unfortunately, she could see who had rushed to her aid until they had stopped right beside her. Even then the helper was anonymous as all she could see was what appeared to be a pair of floating tracksuit bottoms and shoes. "Are you okay?" A girl's voice asked from where a person's head should be. "My leg's stuck and I can't use my quirk." Achiko replied, realizing she was speaking to someone with an invisibility quirk. "Hold still, I'll try to get you out." The girl replied as she attempted to lift the debris. Achiko did her best to try and help, but she had very little leverage and it was very heavy. Her eyes widened as the shaking grew worse and the zero-pointer got closer. "Oh shit." The girl breathed out in a panicked breath as it was almost on top of them. Come on. She cried in desperation as the rubble barely lifted, nowhere near enough to free the trapped girl. Just as the zero-pointer lifted a leg to step forward and on top of the pair a sudden crashing thud echoed throughout the test site, miraculously sending the Titan sliding backwards. A crash, or the sound of something big landing just in front of the pair drew their attention. At least it did the invisible girls as Achiko couldn't see over the rubble pinning her down. "What happened?" she asked the girl who seemed transfixed on whatever made that noise. "A dragon just saved us," the girl replied. Achiko was about to question her when a deep voice boomed. "Fire dragons roar." A sudden burst of hot air filled the street, followed by the sound of something gargantuan crashing to the ground like an unsupported heap. There was silence for a few minutes before a somewhat familiar, yet off, voice spoke. "It's down, everything's okay." It spoke as heavy footsteps started walking in their direction. As they drew closer, Achiko was finally able to see what the other girl had been talking about. A Western-style dragon, almost 3 stories tall, with crimson-red scales towered over them. Its deep forest green eyes taking in the pair, even seeming to see the invisible girl. "Uraraka? Are you okay?" The dragon asked in concern, and immediately her mind snapped back to a green-haired boy she had met just earlier that day. Midoriya. Izuku sighed as he walked off the train platform that had dropped him off. It had been a few days since the entrance exam and he was still feeling a bit down about his failure to pass. Of course he hadn't received the official letter with his results yet, that was supposed to arrive at the end of the week, but he knew he had failed. The worst part was that it didn't affect him as much as he thought it would. Sure, he wouldn't be attending his dream school this year, but there was always next year, right? If not, there were other hero schools still accepting applications. Apparently UA structured their evaluation process so that those who failed to get accepted had time to apply to other schools. He shook his head a bit, trying to clear his mind of those thoughts. He wouldn't let the impending rejection letter hurt his spirit that much. He knew what he was doing by attacking the zero-pointer and would have done it again in a heartbeat. If he hadn't, Uraraka and Hagakure would have been crushed under its gargantuan, metallic feet. It'll be fine, Izuku. Nana comforted. Like you said, you did the right thing, not the easy thing but the right thing. If it costs you a spot at UA, then there are other schools. She's right, kid. Banjo added, sounding far more serious than usual. If they give you the boot for literally being a hero, then it's better to look at other options. I know that I know. Izuku lamented. The wait is just getting to me. I'd much rather go ahead and get it over with than sit around waiting for a week. Which is why your mom told you to go have fun at that party. Nana replied a bit cheekily. Izuku didn't have a reply as he remembered the invitation. Flashback. Izuku moped slightly as he walked down the path to UA's gate. He had failed, he knew he had. Attacking the zero-pointer immediately reduced his points to 0, but he didn't really have a choice. Uraraka was in trouble. She and the invisible girl, Hagakure, would have been crushed if he hadn't destroyed the zero-pointer. Had he made a mistake? Should he try to have dealt with it in another way? Thinking of the two girls made him feel even worse. At first they had been in astonishment of his transformation and what he had done. Thanks and a couple of very strong hugs had sent his stomach doing flips, but the full situation had hit him not long after. Once the adrenaline had worn off and everyone had been seen to by Recovery Girl, the reality had set in. He had attacked the zero-pointer, he had lost all his points. The pair of girls had been apologetic, Uraraka most of all. He had tried to assure them, and himself, that it was okay, that he didn't regret what he had done, and he didn't. He wasn't sure if he had truly managed to convince them, but they had offered apologies nonetheless. Afterwards they had talked for a bit and traded contact information before parting ways. He understood, it had been a long day and everyone was exhausted. He was about to exit the gate when he heard a rush of footsteps behind him. Looking back, he caught sight of the blonde-haired boy he had saved in the exam running towards him. Having caught up to Izuku, the boy doubled over and held up a hand, asking him to wait a second while the boy caught his breath. "Oh man, I'm still way tired." He lamented, having caught his breath. "You're Midoriya, right?" the boy asked with a confidence that told him he was already sure of his guess. Yeah, Izuku Midoriya." Izuku introduced himself. "Kaminari Denki." The boy introduced himself with a wave. "I wanted to say thanks for the save earlier. My quirk shorts out my brain if I produce too much electricity and I misjudged what I was using." He explained sheepishly, rubbing the back of his. "You produce electricity?" Izuku asked in a bit of excitement. "That's really cool, but if your quirk causes your brain to short out from overuse, then shouldn't you have some kind of limiter?" he asked, his hands already itching for a notebook and pencil. "Ugh, I wish." Kaminari complained. "That kind of thing's a bit too expensive for me to just buy, and even if I had one we couldn't use support items today anyway." He shrugged. Izuku nodded. That was indeed true. "But what about you, man?" Kaminari got excited. "I mean, I don't remember much, but you could create clones, and then there was how you took out that giant robot." Izuku blushed in embarrassment. He still wasn't used to having strangers give him compliments. It wasn't that impressive. He argued weakly, his dragon form really gave him a huge boost in physical strength. "Dude, they measure that thing in stories instead of the metric scale." Kaminari replied in amusement. "Anyway, I really owe you one. I don't think I did great, but I'm pretty sure I passed thanks to not getting taken out." Izuku shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, I just didn't want anyone to get hurt. Still, it was really cool of you to help out." Kaminari replied as he adopted a thinking expression. After a few moments he snapped his fingers as a metaphorical light bulb went off. Hey, there's a party being thrown by some school friends of mine. It's kind open invitation for anyone, so why not come? Flashback, and the memory caused him to blush in embarrassment. He still wasn't fully used to social interactions and the invitation had thrown him off. He had promised to think about it and traded contact information with Kaminari. After a few days and his nerves wearing thinner and thinner, his mother had urged him to go have fun to take his mind off the exam results. Though her ground rules were a bit, don't add to the population. Don't subtract from the population. If you end up in jail, establish dominance quickly. Nana repeated while struggling to maintain her composure. She seemed to really focus on the first line though. She snickered. Tsunatori, Tokage, Uraraka, Hagakure, and Heido that I in the last month. Yoichi stated rather blandly. Hudit, she might have a point. Nana admitted quietly. What? Izuku asked, his embarrassment bleeding away to confusion. Unfortunately, he received no answer as the past users avoided continuing the conversation. Deciding to put the conversation out of his mind, he focused on following the directions Kaminari had sent him. After a few minutes, he came to a small house where he could hear the muted thumping of music just outside the door. Checking to make sure the address was right, he knocked, and only a moment later it opened with a smiling Kaminari on the other side. Midoriya, glad you came. He greeted happily before ushering Izuku inside. When Izuku stepped into the house, he was surprised at the amount of people crowded into different groups. The house itself was a modest 2 stories tall, and the downstairs alone seemed to hold 50 people. It was a bit cozier than what he had been expecting a party to be, more like a mixer, but he didn't have much experience in the subject. Dragon Boy, is that you? A familiar voice called. Sure enough, as Izuku looked in the direction of the familiar nickname, he found Setsuna separating herself, literally, from her group of friends. She reattached herself beside him with a large smile and excited gleam in her eyes. Setsuna, it's good to see you again. He greeted happily. He might not know her that well, but it was nice to see a familiar face. Hey Dragon Boy, so what brings you here? I thought Auntie said you lived in Mizudafu? She asked excitedly. I do, but I met Kaminari at the entrance exam and he invited me. Izuku explained, earning a friendly scoff from said blonde. Met? He repeated sarcastically. Sure, we met right as I was gonna get knocked out cold by one of the robots. Midoriya here saved my neck. Kaminari explained with a megawatt grin. Oh ho, is that how you make all your friends, saving them? She asked with a predatory smile. And not all of them. Izuku replied with a slight blush, especially when he remembered how he met Pony and Uraraka. I'd say probably only the cute ones, but you did save Kaminari. She stated, giving him a wink that caused him to chuckle. Beach, I'm adorable. Kaminari replied with no real heat to his words. Several nearby that had been listening to the conversation gave a short laugh or quick smile in amusement. It was a pretty good start to his first party, and as he was led further into the house by Setsuna, he had more fun while meeting and talking to new people. Quite a few seemed to actually enjoy his inquisitive nature and questions about quirks. He still wasn't quite sure what the girl with the slime quirk Sue meant when she called Setsuna lucky, but he assumed it was a compliment. Altogether, it was a very fun and lighthearted time. As he took a sip of the punch Kaminari had handed him, it tasted a bit weird, but not in a bad way. He overheard a conversation between Setsuna and one of her friends. You seriously think All Might would lose to Godzilla? The girl asked in surprise. Easily, Godzilla is way too durable, and that's not even mentioning what his Kaiju physiology allows for. Setsuna replied. Yet All Might has been known to punch through reinforced buildings, create bursts of speed so strong they mimicked flight, and durable enough to withstand blows from even those with quirks that provide them size on Godzilla's scale. Izuku added, surprising himself that he had spoken up. Setsuna's smile sharpened as it morphed into a challenging grin.